You know, back when I was in secondary school many, many years ago, I used to have this English teacher, and she used to tell me, you know, Alex, you really use the word hate way too much. And you know, apparently, I used to describe everything as hate. You know, I hate this, I hate that, I hate this, I hate that, and I was a very angsty teenager, right? So I would always, over exaggerate my feelings, as most usually are. And you know, she was right. You know, I used to use the word hate way too much. And now, whenever I'm tempted to say that I hate something, I hear her voice in the back of my head saying, "Are you sure? Hate's a strong word, Alex. Are you sure you really mean hate?" 9 times out of 10, I don't, you know. But there are some circumstances where, no, I actually do mean the word hate. Like, actually, there are some circumstances where hate as a word is justified. And this is one of them. Today, I'm going to talk about why I hate caveman conservatives. Now, the first question you probably have is, what the hell's a caveman conservative? I mean, I'm obviously not referring to conservatives in general, right? Because, well, I'm a conservative. If you've found me, you're probably conservative yourself, or at least leaning there in some ways. What is a caveman conservative, right? And well, gosh, where do I even begin with this? I suppose a caveman conservative would be... Oh, there's one there! Oh, here we go. You see, you say the word, and then they just turn up out of nowhere. Hey, you're blocking the camera, hello? Oh, hang on, dear viewer, I'm so sorry about this. Hang on, let me just get the flamethrower. 3, 2, 1. Oh, okay, there we go. Oh, honestly, you say the word, caveman conservative, and they just spawn out of nowhere. You know, I think it's best if we I explain on the way. How about we get a move on, and I'll explain as we go along. I think that might be for the best. So let's start off with number 1, tough love. Okay, so let's say that you have 2 best friends, a man and a woman. And I do think, by the way, that every man and every woman should have 1 man and 1 woman best friend. Too many people only have best friends who are of the same gender. Not good. It's not good. But let's say you had 2 best friends, 1 man, 1 woman, and they come to you and they say, "Hey, buddy, pal, best friend, we've been talking and we're thinking about starting a new hobby," right? And you're like, "Oh, wow, a new hobby. Well, what is it? Is it like hockey, hopscotch, pool, laser tag, like what is it?" You're listing things off and they're going, "No. We're thinking, our new hobby, we are thinking of snorting coke. What do you think, friendo?" Right? And again, if your best friends came to you and said this, your reaction, unless you're the most agreeable person on the face of the earth, or you're intentionally trying to ruin their lives, which arguably are often the same thing, by the way, your reaction would probably be, "Get the hell out of here. No, that's not a good idea. You're going to end up addicted. You're going to ruin your life. It's going to bankrupt you. And you probably also don't want to associate with people who snort crack as a hobby." I don't know. I mean, maybe that's just me these days. But no, you would probably say no. You'd put your foot down and say, "Nah, you're not doing that. And if you are doing that, I'm not coming with you," right? All right, another one. Your brother's little problem. Let's say you had a little brother, but he's a complete loser, right? He sits on the couch all day. He's an alcoholic. All he does is drink. He's just like, he does that thing that alcoholics do where they slur the words. They go, they sound like that guy on Shameless, the British version. Frank, I think if you know, you know. They're kind of like, "Oh, hey. So you walk into the living room and you see him on the couch and he sees you and he goes, hey, come here, man, come here." And you're like, oh, because you try and avoid him. He stinks, he slurs, he's awful, right? He's the loser of the family. Everyone's ashamed of him. And he comes to you and says, hey, come here. Can you do me a favour, man? Or woman? Can you buy me some Smirnoff from the store? Oh, come on, I'm too drunk to go. I might end up getting run over. Do you even love me? Do you love me? Here's $5, here's £5, €5, whatever the hell your currency is. Go and get me some Smirnoff, man. Just 1 bottle. Come on, man. Right, what do? Right, your alcoholic little brother's a complete loser. He's saying, please, he's begging you, please give me a Smirnoff. What do? Again, you say no. Right, again, unless you're the most agreeable person on the planet, or you're intentionally trying to sabotage him. Maybe you really hate your brother. Maybe you want him to be an alcoholic. You're a psycho. Unless those things are true, you would probably go, look, I'm not feeding your alcohol problem, okay? You're an alcoholic, you've got a problem, I'm not getting involved, I'm not being responsible for this. You need to sort your life out, get out of here, get your own Smirnoff, right? Lastly, your daughter's disciplinary diet. Let's say you had a daughter, right? 4 years old, something like that. And, you give her a bowl of vegetables every day, right? And why do you do that? Because vegetables, they're greens, you got to get your greens, right? It's full of nutrients, it's good for them, right? You want them to live a healthy diet. One of the biggest problems we have in modern society today in the West is obesity, right? People are slurping down gravy every day. Their blood is like 50% Dr. Pepper. You don't want your offspring to be like that. You're instilling them healthy diets early on, right? Good job. You're a good mother, a good father, whatever. But you made a deal with her. She has a bowl of vegetables, but after she eats the bowl of vegetables, you give her a treat, a donut, right? But she starts having a tantrum, right? She starts going, hey, I don't want to eat the vegetables. I want donut now. Me want donut now. Donut now. Right? They start doing that annoying thing where they start, stamping around and yelling and, making demands. They're testing your parenting, basically, right? They're seeing, like, if I make a big fuss, will I get what I want? It's like the parenting test, which many parents fail. Many parents, they just, as soon as their sons and daughters start having a tantrum, they just give in. They're like, oh, I hate to see her like this. Here's your donut, princess, And then 20 years later, they end up on a Netflix documentary, £600, being fed by a guy called Clyde, who's a feeder. And it all stemmed from this, because you gave her a donut after she had a tantrum. You're the reason that she's £600. You're the reason she's obese, right? This is like parenting 101. And so they never had a vegetable again. They just had donuts every day. You're a terrible parent, right? Or at least that would be the case if you listened, which of course you, being a reasonable person, you would never do that. Of course you would say, hey, you're going to eat your vegetables and then you'll get your donuts, but don't talk down to me. Don't you start having a tantrum, Missy. That's not going to work with me, okay? I'm your father, okay? Have some respect. Or, at least that's what I would do anyway. Right, so in all these circumstances, whether it be the Coke friends, the Smirnoff brother, or the donut daughter, in each one of these circumstances, if you're a reasonable person, you have used tough love, right? And we've all been throughout our lives, we've all been the receiver of tough love, and we've all given tough love. Tough love is, this doesn't even need an explanation, but it's when you put your foot down and you say no to someone for the greater good. It would be easy to make them happy, but you're going to say, no, you're making a mistake here. I'm going to have to intervene. You're making a mistake. I'm not going to along with this mistake. Tough love, right? We've all done this. We've all experienced this. This isn't the interesting part. Here's the thing. While people often use tough love on individuals close to them, as in the examples we've just described, very rarely do people use tough love on collectives they are a part of, right? Groups that they belong to. It's exceptionally rare. Individual tough love, really common. Collective tough love, almost unheard of. And let me give you some examples. Christians versus Muslims. Now, please, listen carefully to what I'm about to say, because I know that if you don't pay full attention, you'll misinterpret what I'm saying and then leave a 5-paragraph comment down below about how much I hate your religion, which is just not true. Right? But let's say that there's a Christian guy, and he's, every religion has a bad apple, right? We've got good Christians, good Muslims, bad Christians, bad Muslims, right? We've got bad apples in each religion. Well, let's say there's a Christian guy and he's a bad apple, right? He's a bad Christian. And he just goes up to a Muslim guy and punches him in the face, right? That's not good. That's not a good thing to do. That's a very violent thing to do. That's not good. It's not a very godly thing to do, right? Obviously, hearing about this, Muslims they're not going to be very happy with this guy, right? They're going to say, hey, what the hell are you doing? You're punching us in the face? What's wrong with you? Here's the thing, the Christians, Most Christians, if they heard this story, they wouldn't like it, right? They wouldn't be like, yeah, rock on, man. They'd be like, oh yeah, that guy, he's terrible, yeah. But here's the thing: the Christians are never going to make as big of a deal out of that situation as the Muslims are. It's just not going to happen. You're not going to see Christians lecturing other Christians about how they treat Muslims badly. It's just not going to happen. And same vice versa. If a Muslim guy punches a Christian guy in the face, the Christians will go, hey, what are you doing? What are you guys up to here? But the Muslims, even if they don't approve, generally speaking, they're not going to be like lecturing their own about how they treat Christians. Christians and Muslims, despite the many theological sort of intricacies between them, like, Christians, they have Catholics, Protestants, Orthodox. Is the Pope legit? Is he an anti-Pope? Even within Catholicism, you have these sort of splits, right? Same with Muslims, with Shia, Sunni. There's a lot of disagreements within these religions. It's not like they're a blanket, it's not like they're all completely united. But when it comes to dealing with the bad apples in the group, and especially if these bad apples are treating members of other religions, rival religions per se, badly, they're not going to lecture them anywhere near as much as they should do. And the reason for this is an obvious psychological fact. Christians feel like they're often under attack by Muslims. Muslims feel like they're often under attack by Christians. If you as a Christian or you as a Muslim start lecturing your own people, your own religion, people will very easily be able to make the argument to you, whose side are you on? What are you doing lecturing us about how we treat Muslims, how we treat Christians? Whose side are you on? Hey, do you not know that they've done terrible things to us? Like, why don't you lecture them, right? It's this sort of factional psychology that goes on there. Like, no one wants to be seen as the guy who is lecturing their own, even if it's the right thing to do, even if, you can't have people in your religion going around punching other people in the face. It's not good. But again, the psychology is people are very hesitant to critique the bad apples in their own religion. I feel like everyone would disagree with this about their own religion, but when it comes to another religion, they would agree completely. They'd be like, oh no, we criticize our own, but those guys never do. And that just proves the point, really, doesn't it? Again, though, this is a really difficult example to understand. Let me give you a better example. Men versus women, right? I mean, it's no secret that in the modern era, especially in the younger generations, like Generation Z, for example, there's a big gender war going on right now. Men are not happy with women. Women are not happy with men in the modern era, generally speaking. Common criticisms that, modern men have about modern women is hoflation, right? Dressing immodestly, no self-respect, jumping from one bed to another, acting like the town bike, everyone's had a ride, right? Men do not like how sort of irreligious, immodest, sort of acting uncouth that women are in the modern era. Women, on the other hand, will say about modern men are violent, right? They're lazy, slothful, unambitious, pathetic in many ways, coomers. There's endless criticisms that men and women have in the modern era about each other. And what a lot of people like to do in the modern era is they like to poo-poo these criticisms. So if a man complains about a woman, they'll just say you're an incel or whatever. If a woman complains about a man, they'll say you're a feminazi, right? Like the criticisms that men and women have of each other are often completely downplayed and poo-pooed. Like, oh, there's just something wrong with you. I actually have a completely different opinion on this. I think men are spot on about women in the modern era, generally speaking. And I think women are spot on about men in the modern era, generally speaking. I think the criticisms are true. I mean, it's undeniable. I mean, is anyone going to say that the men of today are just as good as the men of 20 years ago or 40 years ago, like our fathers and grandfathers' generation? Really? I know a guy who has 1,000 hours in the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim on Steam. What does he do on the game? He has a mod where he makes the elf women naked. I'm not joking. He spent over 1,000 hours on this game, and a lot of it is spent on naked elf mods. That just wouldn't happen 20 years ago, man. I'm just saying, like, that just wouldn't happen. It's the same thing with women. There's some absolute lunatic women out there. I was reading a story earlier of a guy, and his girlfriend scratched his car with like keys or something, because she had a dream where he was cheating on her in the dream, and so she took that as a reality, like, oh, he's cheating on me. This is a sign from God. I'm gonna slice his car up. Turns out she was the one who was actually cheating in reality, right? This sort of lunacy is everywhere these days. But here's the thing. It's really easy for men to criticize women today. It's really easy for women to criticize men today because we're exposed to the other gender's horrors, right? But I think only the smartest men realize the problems that men have, and that women are actually right about a lot of them. And I think that the smartest women realize that a lot of the things that men yap on about women are actually pretty spot on. But here's the thing, again, there is almost no social credit, per se, for a man to criticize other men, right? Because what will happen if you do? You'll get called a simp. You'll get called a white knight. God forbid you get called a male feminist. That's the worst one of them all. So it's like if you're a man and you say, actually, men do have a problem with cooming and being lazy and being unambitious and moaning all the time and blah, blah, blah. Again, you will get called all these things. And no one wants to be seen as that guy who is kicking other men when they're down, when there's a ton of anti-male sentiment in academia, in the media, in government, especially in the left parties. No one wants to be seen as the guy throwing other men under the bus when men get poo-pooed all the time anyway, right? But it's the same thing with women. If you're a woman and you criticize other women about dressing immodestly, sleeping around, being this wannabe boss character, again, what are you going to be called? A pick-me, brainwashed, wannabe trad wife. You'll get called all these strange, insults, because the truth is that a lot of women don't have it easy in a lot of ways these days, right? There's a lot of weird stuff that ladies go through these days. You don't want to be seen as the woman pushing other women down when men are already doing that in many ways, right? And so there's no social incentive for men and women to use tough love against their own. Right, and so society is just stuck in this endless sort of gender war where men are screaming at women, women are screaming at men, often with valid criticisms, but these criticisms are never absorbed and never taken on because the other side doesn't absorb or take on what you say, right? So it's just we're in this endless war. This will be fixed, by the way, as time goes by, because society will return to religion and conservatism will rise, right? That's the inevitable future, but for now, this is hell on earth. Like this situation is hell on earth at the moment. And a last example, and this is what this lecture is really about: progressives versus conservatives, right? The left and the right. Obviously, politics is much more complicated than just left and right, but for the sake of simplicity, progressives will complain about conservatives endlessly. Conservatives will complain about progressives endlessly. But if you're a progressive and you criticize other progressives, because you realise that actually conservatives make a lot of good points about progressives in many ways, an obsession with identity politics that is often very hypocritical, claiming you're anti-racist despite the fact that you're anti-white, claiming that you're anti-sexist despite the fact that many, many progressive movements despise men and despise any little thing about masculinity. Hypocrisies about open borders, as if having an open border is a realistic policy. There's a lot of smart progressives out there, contrary to popular belief, but they get drowned out because there's no. If you're a progressive and you call out other progressives on progressive lunacy, you'll get drowned. You'll get drowned out. You'll have people saying you're a conservative in disguise. Like, well, what the hell are you talking about, right? And it's the exact same thing with conservatives. There's a lot of things that conservatives do, not all conservatives, but the worst of conservatives, where progressives are absolutely right about them. And I don't think that they get called out enough. And that is exactly what I want to talk about today. The dark side of some, not all, but some conservatives. Now look, as I said earlier, if there was a conservometer where you could sort of measure how much of a conservative person you are, and the further right you go, the further right-wing you go, the more authoritarian you are, the more socially conservative you are, the more strict you are. I would say that you could measure this quite easily. Like, first of all, you've got kind of like the Weenie Hut Junior conservatives, right? And these are more like people like Jeb Bush, right, who says things like illegal immigration is an act of love. I know what he means by that, but it's such a strange thing to say, right? Like, kind of like they are what we would call in Britain wet wipes. Like sort of like these sort of like ultra religious but very smiley conservatives. Oh, I don't want to rock the boat. They never they're very submissive. They're good people, but they're kind of weak and submissive, right? And a bit of a joke. I'm sure that you know what I'm talking about. Then in the middle you have like the crusty crab conservatives, right? And these would be people like Nigel Farage. Going in the EU Parliament and yelling, just who the hell do you think you people are? These are guys who are like, they're not authoritarian, they're not strict, but they have balls, you know what I mean? Like, they're not Jeb Bush, like, they won't tolerate disrespect. They're kind of bog standard conservatives, right? Like, he's kind of like a bog standard conservative, if you would. But then you've got, like, on the maximum end, you've got, like, the salty splatoon, right? And that would be like Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore, who says, I would kill drug dealers 100 times over if I could, right? Just ultra authoritarian, doesn't tolerate any nonsense, just ultra strict, just no holds barred, right? And I think that if you're a conservative person, you can plot yourself somewhere on this conservometer, right? And I mean, I don't know you, I don't know where you would place yourself, but if I looked at this and I had to place myself somewhere on this, I would say that I'm somewhere around there. That's where I would place myself. My beliefs are simply too dark for this era, let's say, but too strict for this era at the moment. But that's where I would place myself. And so, the point I'm trying to make here goes without saying that being strongly conservative myself, that I hate even the idea of criticising conservatives. Unfortunately, sometimes tough love is necessary, right? And this is what I want to get across here. If you really love a group of people, you will be its biggest critics, right? This is why we criticise our family members or friends, as I said earlier, when they do something stupid, or when they're about to do something stupid. It's because we love them. And we don't want to see them make a mistake. I think if you really love a group, if you really want the best interests for a certain group, whether that be a religion, whether that be your gender, right, or whether that be your political affiliation, you will be honest and you will point out the bad apples and say, these guys are making us look bad. These guys suck, right? And that's what I want to talk about today. I think if there's one thing that every single conservative person has to learn, and has to learn quickly, it is this. Not all conservatives are created equal, right? Just because you and some guy have the same beliefs, or even the same religion, the same, you vote the same way, whatever, that does not mean that you are the same. You're not the same as them, right? Let me explain what I mean by that. So let's think of the ideal conservative. Who is the ideal conservative? Well, I imagine they look something like this, right? They're usually very, very, very religious. I mean, look, that's just a picture of you, dear viewer, probably, right? I mean, you're probably looking at this thinking, oh man, that's you. Yeah, that's how I like to imagine you. But the ideal conservative, if they are asked, why are you conservative, right? Which is a very interesting question. They would say, but they could explain the complex sociological problems that spawn from progressivism, of which conservatism prevents, right? So they're politically knowledgeable. They could explain how their religion, if they have one, has served as the bedrock of a superior moral civilization, hence why they defend it, right? So they understand theology to an extent. And they could explain the history of the past, how it created the present, and can thus try to predict the future through pattern recognition, right? So they're into history, right? They understand three realms. Politics, which would include sociology and psychology to an extent, theology, and history, right? This is an educated person. This is someone who understands why they believe the things they believe, why they are the person who they say they are, right? That's the ideal conservative. You can put them on the spot, ask them those 4 words, why are you conservative? They could talk endlessly. They could give you endless reasons. They know what they're talking about. That is who I like to think you are. And it's who I like to think I am. I don't know whether we are or not, but that's what I like to think. But then you have the caveman conservative, right? And the caveman conservative looks something like this, right? This is kind of like what the caveman conservative looks like in my head. And if you ask the caveman conservative, why are you conservative, those 4 magic words, this is how they'll respond. Fart noise. They probably wouldn't have a response. And if they did give you a response, it certainly wouldn't be anything like the ideal conservative. It wouldn't be some in-depth, platitudes about politics or religion or, history. This is someone who is conservative, not because of their thoughts or their experiences necessarily. Like they've seen the abyss of hell and they've walked away from it and said, no, that's not for me. I'm going to dedicate my life to never see that abyss again. No, these are people who are conservative, not because they have thought, but because they have not thought, right? They are primitive of the mind. They are instinctual. And I know, by the way, I know that this sounds so holier than thou. I know this sounds so snobby of me. I assure you, I do not like to sound like I'm talking down to someone or talking down to people or being rude, but I'm just being totally honest with you. That is what the caveman conservative is. But, so the ideal conservative and the caveman conservative are both conservative, but they are so for completely different reasons. The ideal conservative has a little bit of a mind, right? He thinks, he reads, he understands the world that he lives in. That's why he is conservative. The caveman conservative is a conservative out of instinct. It is not ideological, it is not a thought process, it is a feeling, right? It is nothing more than a feeling. There's no brain power behind it. And you might say, why does that matter? Like, does it really matter? I mean, who cares? Who cares why people are conservative? Like, what is this weird attempt to gatekeep conservatism, this snobbish elitism, right? What is this? No, it does matter. It absolutely does matter. And in order to understand why it matters, I'm going to explain the 3 symptoms of caveman conservatives. Because when you understand how these people think, you'll understand why it's a problem. All right, so let's start off with a flawed foundation. All right, so let's talk about this. When I was growing up, we used to have yellow streetlights. And I don't know where you're from, maybe you grew up with the same thing, but these were really common back in the 90s and the 2000s. Like all the streetlights, pretty much everywhere in England, at least where I went, were yellow. Like this sort of golden yellow. And so all the streets had like this sort of, I mean, it's disgusting to say, but it's like a pea colour, right? It's like a dehydrated pea colour. Except it looks nice, I think. I mean, it looks like... When I look at this picture, it reminds me of like nostalgia. It makes me nostalgic. It's like, oh, that's the past. It's like, I feel like getting my rose-tinted goggles on. Maybe you understand what I mean? But that all the streetlights used to be like this. And I remember when I was really young and you would look up at the sky was sort of like a dark grey. And you could see a lot of the stars in the sky. Well, not a lot, but you could see a few. And then, sometime in like the mid-2010s, all the yellow streetlights changed to these awful white streetlights, these clinical, really bright, like, oh my God, like they blind you, these streetlights. And I mean everywhere. Like, absolutely everywhere went from yellow to white, like overnight, sometime in like 2015 or something. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I started to look at the sky, and I noticed that it was way different. It wasn't dark grey anymore. It was like a sort of brown, like a sort of dark brown colour, and there was way less stars in the sky. And I couldn't understand why at the time. I was like, why is the sky so different? What's going on here? And I had a friend of mine who comes from a really rural place where there's no streetlights. I'm talking like a farm place, right? Like there's nothing there at all. No streetlights, just totally rural. And they came over to my house, and they were looking out of my window at the sky. And they said to me the same thing, like, why is the sky brown? And why is there no stars in the sky? Like, what's going on? And I said, what do you mean? And they said, where they're from, the sky is totally pitch black and there's loads of stars in the sky, like loads. And that made me think back to when I was younger, like, yeah, there did used to be a lot more stars in the sky, and the sky wasn't always this sort of weird, sickly brown. What's going on? And I realised when they changed the lights from yellow to white, the lights are brighter. By the way, I think they changed that for some energy efficiency, like climate thing. I'm not quite sure. I'm sure there's a reason why. But when they changed it, because the lights are brighter, there's more and what's called light pollution in the sky. Right? And if you live in a big city, or even not even a big city, just a general urban environment, you will have light pollution in your sky. If you're watching this at night by a window, look outside, your sky will look like that. You know, sort of like a dark brown, or maybe like a sort of silver or something. It doesn't look like it's nighttime, even if it's like 2 a.m. It doesn't look nighttime. And there'll be barely any stars in the sky. Like maybe if you squint your eyes and go like, is there any there? You'll see like one or two. But it's really difficult to see any stars. And it's all because of these damn streetlights. We have too many streetlights, and they're too bright. And I couldn't believe when I was, because I've never lived in a really rural place before. I couldn't believe when I was talking to this person from this rural place, when they were telling me about all these stars in the sky that they can see, and how the sky is pitch black. I was like, that's just unthinkable. Like, I genuinely don't believe you, almost, but it's true. And the majority of the Western population now live under a light polluted sky. If we look at like 3 big countries that I love, rural and urban population, the United States is 20% rural, 80% urban, right? In Canada, it's 18% rural, 82% urban. And where I'm from in the UK, it's even worse, 16% rural, 84% urban, right? So just think about that, like over 4 in 5 people live in a place where they were 24/7, well, not 24/7, like every night, basically. They never see a star in the sky, unless they like squint their eyes. Isn't that really strange? Like, we have to go very rural, or even to special observatories to see a non-light polluted sky. Like, that's what a sky is meant to look like, People who live in cities like myself, or city dwellers, when we look at something like that, we don't believe it. Right? We think like, what is that? That's like a wallpaper. That's like when you get like a new iPhone, that's the default wallpaper. That's all that is. That's like a Photoshop. That's not a real sky. No, that's a real sky. That is how a sky is meant to look. Can you believe that? Can you believe that's how a sky is meant to look? There's people in rural places watching this right now, like some guy in Arkansas, in the middle of a farm, who's like, yeah, what's the big deal? Yeah, my sky's like that all the time. No, like, you don't get it. Like, that's a privilege. That sky is a privilege. You don't understand. I have never seen a sky like that in my life, and nor have most people. Like, you want to talk about real pollution. Forget the particulates in the air and the microplastics. Why can I not see a sky like that? That's a real problem, in my opinion. Like, that's like a crime against humanity. But here's the thing: cavemen typically had no light pollution at all. I say typically, I mean, no, they had none at all. With access to a clear, crystal, starry sky at night wherever they were, blowing their minds, right? Just imagine, you're a caveman. No, the reason I said typically is probably because, you could have like a volcano that erupts or something, and then you haven't got light pollution, I suppose, but you've got pollution. But, imagine being a caveman. And, you doesn't matter what, every night you look out at the sky, there's no streetlights, there's no light pollution, and you see that. You see, like, stars in the sky. You see, like, those little comets that go by, asteroids. You see, like, God, I mean, it's just hard to imagine. It's just so, obviously the moon, you would see the moon really clearly. It's just so beautiful. It's just so beautiful. And this is what cavemen got to see every single day, or every single night, excuse me. But here's the thing. Cavemen associated what we today refer to as space as being a sort of heaven, which makes sense if you think about it, because if you look at that, like today, space has sort of been demystified for us. Like when we see a star in the sky, we're sort of like, yeah, we know what that is. Like, it's a star. It's a ball of light. Like when we see a comet, it's like, yeah, we know what that is. Like space is kind of like boring to us in a way. And yet, if you took the average city dweller took them into a rural place and showed them a sky like that, they'd still be blown away. Even though they know everything about space, they'd still be blown away. But a caveman, someone who doesn't know, like a caveman doesn't know what a star is. A caveman has no idea what a star is. He has no idea what a comet is, what an asteroid is. All a caveman knows is that at night, strange lights appear in the sky and they twinkle, right? And there's loads of them, and they're overwhelming, and they're beautiful, and for some reason we are weirdly drawn to them. Imagine being a caveman who doesn't understand what a star is, what space is, doesn't even know that he is on Earth, right? He doesn't even know what a planet is, and he's looking up at the sky and seeing all that, right? Inevitably, he is going to think, that's the divine, that's God, or gods, or that's where the gods live, right? That's heaven. Right? And it makes sense if you think about it, because when you think of, when people don't look down to God, right? People don't pray downwards, they pray upwards, right? People, he's gone up to heaven, right? We associate God with going up, with the stars, with being upwards, right? And it is innate for human beings to be religious, contrary to popular belief. Human beings are naturally superstitious, because superstition spawns from trying to make sense of something that does not make sense. So it puts our minds at ease, which is essentially what a lot of the early religious sorts of beliefs were. It was sort of like putting our minds at ease. And celestial bodies are constantly referenced in religion. I mean, for example, the free men making their way to Bethlehem, following what? Did they follow a compass? Did they follow a map? No, they followed the star in the sky. And why a star? Because a star's up there in the sky, it's heavenly. It's related to God. God is essentially guiding them, right? That's really the underlying message of that. It's that God is guiding these men to this place to fulfill a certain destiny. This is the divine destiny that is being assisted by God using a celestial body. It's not a coincidence. That story could have been made a lot more human, a lot more realistic, per se. It's not a coincidence that it wasn't. People did used to use the stars to guide them back in the past. It isn't exactly unrealistic, come to think of it. Same thing with Adam and Eve. People think, what does Adam and Eve have to do with the stars or space or whatever? Well, it has everything to do with it. What is the event called when Adam and Eve left the Garden of Eden, were cast out of the Garden of Eden? The fall. Right? A fall implies going up to down. Well, if up is where heaven is, if that's where paradise is, that's where Eden is, and earth is down here, right? We are lowly on the earth, not as lowly as hell, which is often associated with going down to hell, right? And heaven is up there. The fall is a sort of the fall of Adam and Eve is a sort of subconscious, not subconscious, a subtle reference to the fact that early humans believed that paradise was related to space, heaven was up in the stars, if that makes sense. And lastly, of course, the Islamic crescent, right, on the top of a mosque. Seen as the symbol of the religion, the crescent and the star. Again, these celestial bodies, these celestial icons are commonly used in religions for a reason. And it's not just in religion. Celestial bodies are even referenced in flags. Take the United States, for example. The most powerful nation in the world. What does it have 50 of it on its flag? 50 stars, right? 50 celestial bodies are on the United States flag. Could have been any icon on there. Could have been an eagle, right? Could have been anything, but no, a star. But it's not just the United States. Take their rival nation, China. What do they have? Stars. And by the way, isn't that crazy? This is an underrated thought that I've never heard anyone else say. The United States and China, one is west, one is east. They are comprised of completely different people, completely different races, completely different languages, completely different histories. And despite all the differences between these two countries, both of them have the exact same symbol on each one of their flags. What a coincidence is that? Well, it's not a coincidence at all, because regardless of all the differences between the Americans and the Chinese people, of which there are many, they're both human. And human beings, we're all in awe at space, the stars, the sky. But really, the reason why we're so obsessed with the star symbol is because it's related to the heavens, right? It's not really about space, because we know that the stars don't look like stars, right? The star symbol, stars don't look like that, right? It's a sort of it's a reference to religion. That's really what it's a reference to the divine. To invoke celestial imagery on your flag is like saying our nation is divine. We have blessings from the divine. We are always looking upwards. We're not just we are a divine nation. That's what the star really invokes. That's why you have these two completely different countries that invoke the same symbol, the exact same symbol. It's mind-blowing when you think about it. Like, if you go into the subconscious of the human psychology and you see that, it's mind-blowing. And of course, same thing with Japan, right? Land of the rising sun. Same thing with countries like Turkey and many other Islamic nations. You have as I said earlier, the crescent and the star again, right? It's not a coincidence that celestial bodies are referenced even in modern day nations, in modern day flags. These are references to the old perception that space was heaven, that up was God. That is what the star is. That is what the sun is. That is what the moon is. That is why we're so obsessed with this. It's not about science as we understand it today in the modern era. It's about religion. Religion before religion was even a thing. Before we even called it religion. This is more like superstition, if anything. And so space is heaven. Right, that is what cavemen used to think. They used to think space is heaven. The stars were gods, even. Right, that's what the old pantheons were about. Like, the stars were gods. That's where the gods are. And or of course in the Abrahamic religions, space was more seen as like that's what God made. That's where God lives. It's heaven. That's where paradise is. It's above us, right? But of course, that's not true. Right, space is not heaven, right? Really, we know what space is, right? We know what it is. Well, to an extent, we know what it is. We don't know everything about it, but we definitely know that there's no angels there, at least from what we've seen thus far. It's not like space is not heaven in the way that we think of it today. And if you asked the average Christian or the average Muslim or the average religious person in general, is space heaven? They would say no. My kingdom is not of this earth. Right, it might not even mean this dimension, this universe, right? It means something completely different. It's like a different realm, I think most religious people would agree with that, right? Like Earth is not it's not the only sort of fallen domain per se, as people would used to think. I think most people would say no, it's the universe as we know it that is the fallen domain, right? But back then, that's what people thought. They thought space was heaven. So this is a flawed foundation, right? Space is heaven, okay? Now, if you believe space is heaven, if you're a caveman and you think space is heaven, everything up there is godly. The stars are gods, or that's where God lives, whatever the belief is. If you think space is heaven, what you are looking at in the night sky is the divine. That is going to lead you to some very unusual thoughts. Take thunderstorms, for example. I mean, imagine being a caveman and seeing that. That's scary for a human today, and we know everything about thunderstorms. We know what a thunderstorm is. We know about the weather. We know about all this stuff. A thunderstorm has no mystique today. But if you're a caveman, a thunderstorm, you're going to look at that and go, oh my, dude, hang on a minute. If God's up there, and God is sending these rays of lightning from the sky, from heaven to the earth, and they're loud, and sometimes they cause fires, and there's always loads of rain, right? You would think, as a caveman, by the way, when I say caveman, I really mean early human as well, but we'll say caveman. If you're a caveman, you would think thunderstorms mean God is angry, right? I mean, if God's up there, and there's just these white lights and fires everywhere and rain, you're going to think God's angry with us. God's cursing us. He's showing that he's not happy with us. We've lost our way, right? That's what you would think. And so, but of course, that's not true either, right? Of course it's not true. Thunderstorms don't mean that God is angry, right? I mean, maybe some religious people would say that is the case. But I think most people would say when there's a storm, it's more like no, we can explain this using like some sort of climatology that like we know why the thunderstorm's happening. Yeah, we predicted it 2 weeks ago. It's not because you dropped the crisp packet on the floor that's why there's a thunderstorm. Do you know what I mean? Like we know that. But the caveman didn't know that. And so the flawed foundation of space is heaven has led to some sort of conspiratorial thinking. Thunderstorms mean God is angry, right? Space is heaven. Thunder comes from heaven. Thunder's not good. God is angry with me. That's why he's doing the thunder, right? And so what these early humans would try to do is they try to negotiate with God. Right? So what they would do is they would find a mountain, like the highest mountain they could find. And again, why a mountain? Because a mountain's high. And if you climb the mountain, then you're closer to God, right? You're closer to the heavens. You're closer to space as we know it today. But you're closer to God. You don't want to pray to God in your basement. That's not very godly, is it? You're closer to hell than you are to heaven. No, you want to get as high up as possible, right? You want to talk to God from the highest peak. And so to negotiate with God during these storms or these terrible climate problems, they would climb the mountain and then they would bring like an animal, like a sheep or something they're going to eat. And they would build an altar and they would kill the animal on top of the altar. And then they wouldn't eat it, which they want to do. But they would say, they would negotiate with God. They would say, Lord, these terrible storms you've been giving us lately, we're so sorry, we don't know how we've wronged you. Here's a goat. Please take the goat. Like, we want to eat this goat. Like, oh man, we've raised this goat. This is our best goat. But we're not going to eat it. Like, this is your goat. We're sacrificing this to you. Right? Which is why in a lot of early religious texts, there's a lot of things about animal sacrifice, right? And burning the animal, smelling the animal goes to God. The humans wanted this animal, they raised it, but they're giving it up for God, right? And so they would negotiate with God. They would say, the thunderstorm is we've displeased God. If we sacrifice this animal, we're giving God something in return. We're praying, we're showing that we're devout. Maybe God will forgive us. Maybe we won't get thunderstorms anymore, right? And what would happen inevitably is the thunderstorms would clear, because thunderstorms don't last forever. And so, eventually the thunderstorm would look like the Windows XP background again. And what would people think? What would the cavemen think? Well, they would think, it worked. The sacrifice worked. God's happy with us again. Like, there was thunderstorms, he was unhappy. We sacrificed the goat, and now look, everything's great. We've got sun again, right? And so this normalized the psychology of a sort of conspiratorial action of animal sacrifice, right? And so, again, they would think the animal sacrifice pleased God. So they would keep doing it. They would keep doing it and passing it on, right? And so, but again, it's not true, right? Like we know that's not true. I mean, maybe some religious people watching would say that it is true, and okay, fine. But realistically speaking, if you kill a goat for God, I don't know, like maybe for maybe like fasting for Lent, or if you're doing Ramadan where you're forgoing food, maybe that works. Maybe in your religion, animal sacrifice is a thing that God likes. I don't know, but realistically speaking, I think most people would not agree. But would not agree with an animal sacrifice today. And I don't mean that in a politically correct way. I mean, I think people sort of see the world differently today, even if they are religious. Some people. Right, and so, again, this is a conspiratorial action. The flawed foundation is space is heaven. The conspiratorial thinking is that thunderstorms mean God is angry. The conspiratorial action was the animal sacrificed pleased God. That's why the thunderstorms went away. And so, the point here is a flawed foundation has led to conspiratorial thinking and action. That is the sort of the early thought process of the caveman, right? And you can't blame the caveman for thinking that, because he's a caveman. They didn't have access to information like we do today, right? Where we can just look things up and there's a million people that we can talk to who are experts on things. They didn't know. These were the OGs, right? They didn't have anything. They just had to go off superstition. They had to try to make sense of this confusing, complex world that they're in. These are primal humans who were in a world just as complex as the one that we are in today. You can't get angry at them for that, right? Please do not think that I'm talking down to our ancestors here, like, oh, what a bunch of morons. I'm absolutely not saying that at all. The reason I'm explaining this is because the caveman conservative, the conservatives of today, many conservatives of today, have the same thought process in many regards, right? So let's have a bit of a history lesson before I go into what that means. So in the sort of late 19th century to the early 20th century, you had the decline of Christendom across Europe, right? And one of the big reasons for this is because of advances in science, right? Particularly biology. People used to believe in creationism, right? Like Adam and Eve. That was like the universally accepted, this is where humans came from. We came from the Garden of Eden. There was Adam, there was Eve, and then they fell, right? That story was what everyone believed. This was the origin of humanity. By the way, I'm not poo-pooing you if you do believe that today, by the way. But I am saying that this used to be something that was held by the majority. Then when Darwinism came into the picture and we had evolution, when we could look at fossils and, we could sort of look at, use the scientific evidence, less people started to believe in creationism and more people started to believe in evolution. And as a result, this is just one example, a fragment of what happened, but people started to lose faith in Christianity in general. People started to believe more in science in general. Science, which by the way used to be seen as a very Christian sort of subject, if you would, like some of the best scientists in the world throughout history have been Christians. It started to be seen as a separate and opposing force. Like you had Christianity and you had science, and that's the end of the story, right? And so people moved away from Christianity. And as a result, Christendom, sort of like the Christian dominance in Europe, started to fade away. And as a result of this, in the early 20th century, in the late 20th century, we had the rise of ideologies, right? So we had a void. Christianity, the people slowly losing faith in Christianity, it left a void in people's hearts, and people craved, something to believe in, but it had to be something modern, it had to be something scientific, it had to be something futuristic, something that was very emotional. And so we had the rise of ideologies, and first came communism, right? The idea that we don't need religion, it's all poo-poo. We need science. Science will become our new religion, and we're going to create a one world sort of government where all humans are equal. There is no rich, no poor, no proletariat, no bourgeoisie. It's just a government of the people. It was really, communism was about reinventing humanity. It was about looking at the last few thousands of years of human history and going, this is pathetic. This is just totally inadequate. Let's make sure that the future is one of progress and one of equality and it's advancement. We're not held back by some sort of primal ideas. But then from that, in reaction to communism came fascism, and fascism was very much a reaction to communism. The idea that communism is actually enslavement of man. The best of humanity will be enslaved by the worst. Equality is a myth. It is a lie. It is a fiction. Communism would be the end of the human soul. It would be the end of the human spirit. Any nation that makes themselves communist will inevitably end up purging their greatest people, and humanity will essentially never recover, right? Fascism was also kind of anti-religious in many ways, but to a much more subtle extent. Communists used to draw like propaganda of like Jesus in a bin, being taken out in the trash, whereas, fascists were sort of like, they would sometimes describe themselves as Christians, even if they really wanted to completely overwrite Christianity, they would at least sort of like sympathize with it in some way. Either way, however, these ideologies catered to people who were more left-brained or right-brained. Either way, however, they were ultimately, in their purest form, a replacement for the Christian way of life that came before it, right? That's the point. But of course, we all know what happened to these ideologies for the most part, right? Fascism was destroyed by defeat in World War II, right? Not just the Third Reich, but Mussolini's Italy and most of the others, right? Just flattened in World War II, destroyed by defeat. communism was destroyed by dysfunction in the Cold War many decades later. You had things like breadlines. The centrally planned economy didn't work. A sort of totalitarian regime that didn't even believe its own lies, but everyone went along with it anyway. But both of these ideologies failed in their own ways and collapsed, and so that's what happened. And then this moves us on to today, the period that we're in today, which is the late 20th century, early 21st century, which was known as the end of history. Because the idea is that people looked at the horrors of the ideologies of the 20th century, and they said, why did they fail? What was the problem with them? And they looked at, with communism, they looked at economic socialism. They said, right, the breadlines, the centrally planned economy, the internal passports, trying to control wealth and determine who gets what. That was the problem, right? And so from economic socialism, they said, from now on, we're gonna do the opposite. We're gonna champion economic capitalism, like capitalism on crack, right? Like free trade, globalization, mass migration, no tariffs. Let's just no, like as little taxes, as little government control, as little public services, privatization. We want as little government hands in the economy as possible. We're going to do the exact opposite of what the Soviets did, right? But when it came to the fascists, they looked at they looked at the fascists and said, well, what did they do wrong? And they said about concentration camps, racism, ultra conservatism, right? Telling people how to live their lives, what they can and can't do, right? What is decadent and what is not decadent. And they said, right, well, we're just going to do the opposite. We'll have social progressivism on crack, right? So there's no rules anymore, basically. I mean, obviously there's rules, but there's you can pretty much do what you want. You can dress how you want. You can love, you like do what you want. Like you can basically do whatever you want socially. Like you want to be a gay man, you can be a gay man. You want to be a lesbian, you can be a lesbian. You want to have your hair blue, you can have your hair blue. You want to have a million tattoos, you can do it, right? There's no societal expectations, basically, within some reason for how people should behave, to the point where this becomes like state sanctioned, right? Like that's a picture in the UK, for example, where you have a police car that has gay pride stars. Again, celestial imagery there, but besides the point, gay pride on the police car, as if gay pride is sort of state sanctioned. It's not just state sanctioned, it's required, like it's enforced, right? It's like you're the bad guy if you don't let everyone do what they want, basically, right? That is like social progressivism. So it's like you can't judge people anymore, right? That it was because that's what fascists did. Like fascists didn't just judge people; they made it illegal for people to do what they want. So now we're going to make it illegal for you to even judge people on anything, right? That's like it's the opposite, right? And this was what was called the end of history, right? The idea was these two things, economic capitalism, social progressivism, you put them together and you have neoliberalism. I talk about this endlessly. I'm sure long-term viewers are sick of me talking about this combination. Like, Alex, you've told me this 50 times, but I have to drill it into people. Like, this ideology is the engine. It is the mindset behind the modern world as we know it today. It is the status quo establishment. And it neoliberalism spawned from being horrified, and rightfully so in many ways, of the ideologies of the 20th century as a result of the decline of Christianity, right? So the obsession with capitalism, mass migration, free trade, no tariffs, etc., is because people are traumatized of the horrors of communism and how people used to eat stale bread and all this sort of stuff. Social progressivism, state mandated Pride Month, hate speech laws, not making it illegal like feminism is like the state doctrine, like women have to be men and men have to be women. Like this is a response to fascism. It's a response to, and fascism is not just Nazism, by the way, though that is the most potent sort of strain of fascism which it is a response to. But it is a response to that. It is sort of like a trauma response. Like both of these two things taken to their maximum extreme is a trauma response to communism and fascism. That's what it is. That is the end of history. But they called it the end of history because they thought it's the end of history. We've figured it out. We don't need anything else. Economic capitalism and social progressivism is all we need, right? Neoliberalism is the answer. This is how it's going to be now forever, right? And when you talk about people who believe in economic capitalism very, very strongly, they legitimately do believe that capitalism is going to last forever, even in spite of artificial intelligence and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They believe in it 100%. When you talk to people who are social progressives, they think that everyone will be progressive. If you say, what will the world look like in 100 years? They'll say, oh, everyone will be progressive. No one will be conservative or religious. They don't realise that the opposite is actually true, demographically speaking. But again, there's a certain arrogance from the neoliberals. There's a certain arrogance that they are totally correct. History is over. It's the end of history. We've got it figured out, right? They're forgetting, however, that for thousands of years, before the ideologies that you are now reacting to, there was another way of life called Christianity that people used to abide by pretty successfully from one generation to another to another to another. Seems quite convenient that you're forgetting about that, but I digress. And so when you look at world leaders today, this is just an old picture of a handful of world leaders from numerous different nations. Like it doesn't really, these people don't really matter, right? But they are figureheads of neoliberalism, in my opinion. They believe that neoliberalism is the answer. A lot of these people come from a sort of boomer generation. Not all, but many come from a boomer generation. Their parents fought in World War II. They grew up during the Cold War. From their parents fighting in World War II, they're traumatized by fascism, hence why they love social progressivism. From listening about the Cold War when they were younger, they're traumatized by communism, and so they're obsessed with capitalism, right? And rightfully so in many ways. Let's be honest. I mean, it's not great. But this is why they're neoliberal. This is why they're so arrogant. This is why they're convinced that we're at the end of history, that they have all the answers. This is why when you try to say, hey, shouldn't we be a little bit more socially conservative? Like, do you think we've gone too far? Or when you try to say, hey, don't you think that a little bit of socialism is okay? Like, do we really need like 1 million immigrants a year? Like, can we not? Like, they'll sort of laugh at you. They'll put their nose up at you and go, what did you just say? Like, what an imbecile! What a fool this guy is! Go back to school. Like. They're very arrogant, these neoliberals, right? So, but again, this is the same sort of dynamic if you think about it. The flawed foundation is neoliberalism is the answer. The conspiratorial thinking is, well, let's just do the opposite of the 20th century ideologies. And the conspiratorial action is, let's promote completely open borders, free trade and globalization, while destroying the family unit, gender roles, and every social taboo ever in the name of progress, right? Which is exactly like this has been the modus operandi of practically every Western nation for the past 40, 50 years. Like, this has been it. Well, not really 40, 50 years. It's been like this in terms of social progressivism, really, since after World War II, particularly pronounced in the 60s and the 2010s and the 2020s. In terms of economics, it's been like this since the 90s with the fall of the Soviet Union, right? But either way, this has been like this. This is how the Western world is ran, and this is the thought process of how that came to be, right? But and the ideal conservative understands this well, right? In fact, it's often precisely the reason they are a conservative in the first place. Do you remember earlier when I said that the ideal conservative understands politics, religion, and history? They would be able to explain to you exactly what I've just explained, that you understand neoliberalism, you understand what neoliberalism is, you understand, how we got here, right? You get it, right? You understand what I've just said. I'm preaching to the choir if you're an ideal conservative, right? But here's the thing. So the ideal conservative believes that neoliberals are running society into the ground by accident, right? As we've just said. They're naive. Right, they're products of their time. They're so focused on World War II and the horrors of fascism, and rightfully so, and the horrors of the Cold War and the horrors of communism, and rightfully so. But they don't realise that doing the opposite has led to new problems. Right, like it's led to our following this ideology to the letter has led to unaffordable housing, gender wars, mass migration and all the sort of sectarianism that comes with that, an increase in racism, an increase in religious violence. There's so many problems. I mean, if you're a young person today, if you're watching this and you're like in your 20s, as I am, and you look out at your country, whatever your country is, if you're in the Western world, you're probably going like, man, why do I even bother? You're like, what am I going to do? Like, this is a nightmare. Like, we have been given, and I don't like to be that guy who just like whinges, but we have been given a really bad hand here, right? And it's because our parents and grandparents have been following neoliberalism. This is what they believe, right? But again, it's an accident, right? They're not destroying society on purpose, right? It's not like they're making our lives worse because they hate us. It's an accident. It's because they think that they're the good guys. They think they're on the right side of history. They think they're at the end of history, and they don't realise they're not. Right? Neoliberalism will be overturned within our lifetimes. When I am, in my, 50s, 60s, 70s, let's hope I live that long, let's hope I don't have some bad health or something, I don't know, but, if we people in our 20s, let's say, live as long as, 60s, 70s, 80s, we will be living in a much more religious, much more authoritarian, much more conservative time in response to the failings of neoliberalism. It's inevitable. I mean, it's the pendulum swing. It's how it always goes, right? But here's the thing. Ideal conservatives understand that this is an accident. But what if you thought it was on purpose? Ooh, right? Because if you think that neoliberals are purposefully ruining society, that completely changes the way that you see the world. And it completely changes the way that you live your life. For example, well, this is where caveman conservatives go wrong, right? Because if you say that neoliberals are running society into the ground on purpose, then what's going to come from that? If you think that they're doing this on purpose, well, if perceived as accidental damage, the establishment is viewed as a sort of clown world, right? This is how the ideal conservative views the establishment, right? That's where the clown world meme came from. Like, they're just a bunch of fools, right? They just don't know what they're doing. Like they're just absolute morons, for lack of a better term, right? That's like our generation of world leaders. It is foolish, right? They're just completely ignorant. But that's if you perceive it as accidental damage. If you perceive it as intentional damage, you're going to view the establishment as some sort of Illuminati, right? You're not going to think they're stupid. You're going to think they're geniuses. You're going to think, whoa, oh my God. They're bringing immigrants into the country to purposefully drive down house prices. And then if they drive down house prices, then we'll all be homeless. And then when we're all homeless, we'll be reliant on the state. And if we're reliant on the state, then we'll be under the control of the psychopaths of the Illuminati, right? That's the sort of thought process, right? So, and you notice this with conservatives. Some conservatives view the establishment as the biggest morons ever, clowns, right? But some view them as the New World Order, the Illuminati, right? The puppets on the strings, right? Many conservatives will go in between the two, right? Sometimes, which is quite an irrational position if you really think about it, because it just doesn't make sense. How can you be a clown and a member of the Illuminati at the same time? You know what I mean? But if you perceive it as intentional damage, if you don't understand, if you're not privy to the history of neoliberalism and how it came to be, and you don't understand the ideology and et cetera, then if you look around at our world leaders, you would despise them because they're making your life worse, right? They're making housing less affordable, flooding your country with immigrants that is extremely unpopular in whatever Western country you're in, destroying relations between men and women. Like, if you didn't understand how this came to be, you would think it's intentional. That's a totally logical thing to conclude. If you weren't educated in what's going on, you would think this is clearly intentional. They hate me. They must hate me. They must hate my family. They're doing this on purpose, right? That's what you would think. And that's what the caveman conservative has done. He doesn't understand how neoliberalism came to be. And so he thinks neoliberals are running society into the ground on purpose. And so from that, he has a conspiratorial thought. Some sort of Illuminati is secretly controlling our politicians from the shadows, using them as puppets to implement an anti-human agenda, right? And this is where you have people like David Icke, who I find very entertaining, right? But David Icke, he often, I saw him do like this presentation, I think in Australia, where he was talking about how like Queen Elizabeth is a lizard. And you know what I mean? Like things like that. Like this is where this comes from. It's like, in my opinion, like that's what I think anyway. And we've all heard of the NPC meme, right? Like the NPCs are sort of like people who just go along with like whatever they've been told by the neoliberal establishment, right? They don't think for themselves. And that's how a lot of cavemen conservatives view the NPCs. Like these are people who are under the control of the Illuminati. That they control academia, the economists, the entertainment, the mainstream media. The NPC is an unthinking mind who just goes along with whatever slop is thrown their way, right? They're too naive, right? That's what the caveman conservative thinks. And so, logically speaking, if you view the world, if you view neoliberalism as intentional, then and you're going to view the people who go along with it as NPCs. But not only that, you're going to break the conditioning, right? You're going to be obsessed with being a free thinker. You don't want to believe, you're not going to believe what the establishment tells you at all. You're going to break away from that. You're going to think for yourself, right? As the old song goes. But this leads to conspiratorial action. Everything the establishment does must be resisted with a fierce ferocity, because nothing they do is ever as advertised, but always evil in disguise, right? This is exactly why there's so many people today who don't believe anything, who don't believe literally anything that any mainstream institution says, because they believe that the mainstream institution, because they are running society into the ground, and they are, make no mistake, the establishment today is running society into the ground, it will not last. But if you think it's intentional, and they're doing it on purpose, then you're not going to believe anything they say, because you're going to think they're an Illuminati, you're going to think they have an anti-human agenda, you're going to think everything they do is out to get me, and my family and my friends. That's what you're going to think. And that's exactly what the caveman conservative does. His flawed foundation leads to conspiratorial thinking and conspiratorial action. And I'd like to give some examples. 3 examples of conspiratorial action. Firstly, 15-minute cities. Okay. So the way that current cities work is they're kind of like this, right? You have a bunch of housing, you've got like the suburbs, right? A bunch of like a housing estate where you probably live. Then you've got a bunch of roads, right? And the roads lead to like the hospital, the university, and the supermarket, right? And so but let's say that you only have one car in your family, let's say, because that's becoming increasingly common these days with how the economy is going, and so you can't use the car. You're a university student. Okay, so, if you can't use the car because someone else is using it, what have you got to do to get to university? Well, you've got to walk all the way to university. And this could take like half an hour. Let's say it took you half an hour, right? So, by the way, I've been there when I was walking to school and college. I had to do a massive walk with a big fat backpack on my back that weighed more than me probably. And gosh, I'm swearing that really did my back in. But anyway, let's say that's what happened. Okay, well, you've got no car, so what are you going to do to get back? Well, you've got to walk it back again, right? So you're spending an hour walking, right, to get from your home to the university every single day, there and back. Half an hour there, half an hour back. And the reason for this is because all cities are made for cars, right, generally speaking, right? Like almost every city is made assuming that you have a car. If you live in a city and you don't have a car, you're almost seen as someone who's disabled. Let's say that you want to go to the supermarket, right? Maybe you wanted to go to the supermarket when you're at the university, but you can't. Why? Well, what does that red line mean? It means it's a road only. No walking. You can't walk along the side of the road on the pavement. Road only. So then you've got to go home, and only then can you use the car to drive to past the university to the supermarket somewhere you've already been today, and then you've got to drive all the way back there, right? So you've gone up and down this road in one day 4 times. Right, 2 times walking, 2 times in the car. And again, it's because cities today are not revolving around humans. They're designed around cars. It assumes you have a car. And they're laid out with the assumption that you have a car. This is where 15-minute cities come in. A 15-minute city is an urban planning concept that is designed to revolutionise the city. And the idea is, what if you put all the buildings that people use, like the hospital, the university, and the supermarket, in one place? And then you put all the houses around the place so that you could walk, or bike, but walk, from wherever you live to any building that you need within 15 minutes. everything is within 15 minutes of your house. So you don't really need a car anymore. You can have a car, but you don't need a car, right? The city has been revolved. The city has been planned from the ground up to revolve around you, a human being with legs, right? Not a car, not a machine, right? You're not going to be walking for hours on end, or, oh, sorry, you can't go down there because you need a car, right? You're not going to get ran over. The entire point is to make a city that is less polluted, that is more quiet, more calm, but more convenient. By the way, you'll notice the shape of the city is not a convenient. There's a reason. There's a reason why that shape is the best shape. But basically, the 15-minute city is a genius idea. Really, I mean, it really is a genius idea. And if you put them both side by side, a current city and a 15-minute city, the current city is a city not designed for humans, making cars mandatory with extremely inefficient layouts that make everything require planning. Leading to slow outcomes with high pollution. If you live in a current city, the chances are you're breathing in toxic diesel, petroleum fumes. You've got rubber in your lungs from because when cars are driving, the tires are hot. Little parts of rubber come off in the air. People breathe it in. People don't know that, by the way. But there's so much pollution, so much noise. If you have young offspring, you can't trust them to go outside and play if you live in a busy place because they might get ran over. Current cities are a nightmare, but the 15-minute city, I mean, it solves all that. It's the opposite. Cities designed for humans, making cars not even required, with extremely efficient layouts requiring no planning, leading to fast outcomes with low pollution. This is great. I would have loved to have grown up in a 15-minute city rather than a current city. Oh man, cleaner air, no noise, no cars going by beeping their horns every 5 minutes, or some 19-year-old who just got his driving license in a Volvo, who's modded his Volvo so then the engine goes, and you can hear it 5 miles away. You know what I'm talking about. It's just like, imagine if we didn't have to live like this. What if we could just walk everywhere? What if, everything was just, next to your house? Whoa! This is possible. That's the 15-minute city. And urban planners, not the government, right? Urban planners are people whose jobs it is are to plan out cities. They have been saying, hey, this is way better. We should do this. Why don't we do this rather than that, right? Well, this is the problem. The caveman conservative hears about the 15-minute city. He doesn't focus on the positives. He goes, not on my watch. Well, what are you talking about? No way. Right? And the reason is because of the 15-minute city conspiracy. Right? The caveman conservative, because he thinks that neoliberals are ruining society on purpose, he thinks he sees the 15-minute city not from the benefits it brings, clean air, lower noise, more convenience, cities revolving around humans. He sees it in terms of what is lost. Right, so what is lost in a 15-minute city? Well, cars, right? By the way, a lot of 15-minute cities, you can still use a car. It's not like every 15-minute city wants to get rid of the car. But for those that do, okay, they've got rid of the car, right? So they go, okay, I'm losing something. The neoliberal Illuminati wants me to lose the car. Why? Why do they want me to lose the car? Oh my God. Right, and they say, well, it's because they want to limit my movement. Yeah, man. They wanted me to lose the car, so then they've got me right where they want me. That's why it's called a 15-minute city, because you can't leave more than 15 minutes away from your house. Dude, I'm on to them. I'm on to you, Bill Gates. I'm on to you, Jeff Bezos. Right, that's what they think. And so they think that 15-minute cities are going to be used to enforce Illuminati lockdowns or something. No cars, so you can't leave. They're going to limit your movement, and they're going to lock you down. And when they've locked you down, you're like an animal, man. They've got you right where they want you. They've got you in the stable, right? They can make sure that you don't leave that bubble, and they can do experiments on you, man. It's like a fallout vault, right? That's how these people think. Now, here's the thing. If you have critical thinking, right, you would pose a question to yourself when posed with this conspiracy, and that question is this: don't current cities give more control to the Illuminati than 15-minute cities? Right? I mean, if you think about it, right? Okay, what do you lose in a 15-minute city? A car sometimes. Okay. Who governs cars? The government. And if the government is run by the Illuminati, doesn't the government control cars? It doesn't the Illuminati give out driving licenses? Don't they control the car that you drive and the regulations it has? Like, wouldn't it would make much more sense to me, like, if I was the Illuminati and I had it out for humanity and I wanted to, create a dystopian society, I would make a city where you can't get anywhere, especially places like hospitals, for example, without a car, which is the case in most cities today, and then I would slowly I would make it so only those who are obedient can drive. No, if you're a critic, you can't drive anymore. You're a danger to society, right? That is a lot more dystopian than a 15-minute city, because in a 15-minute city, you can walk anywhere. Like, you have more access to the institutions of society in a 15-minute city than you do in a current city, because the car, which can easily be exploited by a totalitarian regime, the Soviet Union, for example, had internal passports, which is sort of similar in a way to what a car is in practice. Couldn't they just, like, there's no middlemen, right? The 15-minute city cuts out the middleman that the government, the Illuminati, controls, right? Like, doesn't that just make much more sense? Like, isn't a current city way worse for you than a 15-minute city? And also, if they wanted to lock you down in a 15-minute city, but they can already lock you down now. I mean, that's what 2020 was, like Corona. We had lockdowns then. And they locked you down in current cities. And it's like, how is it like how is it more easier to lock you down in a 15-minute city where everyone is more likely to know each other, right? Where you can walk to the institutions, within 15 minutes, where it's going to be much more communal. Current cities are way more Illuminati coded, don't you think? Like, where no one knows each other, you need a car. Like, it just boggles the mind. Like, how can you think that a 15-minute city is more dystopian than a current city? There's nothing more dystopian than current cities, and I'm not even mentioning the light pollution, by the way, right? But there's nothing more dystopian than a current city. Like, come on, man. Like, use your brain. But they don't do it, right? That's the point. Like, that's the point. The flawed foundation has led to conspiratorial thinking, conspiratorial action, and critical thinking has been lost. But it's all because of a flawed foundation. And so, these guys, these cavemen conservatives who could live in somewhere like this, a beautiful place full of houses with a right near hospitals, walking distance, bikes, no air pollution, clear skies, beautiful, right? They look at this and they go, this is hell on, I'm not living in this place, or get out of here, this is disgusting. No, they want to instead live in somewhere like this. They want to live in their current city, in their current housing, with a car everywhere. Everyone's got a bloody sports car with diesel fumes everywhere. They look at this and the sky is like smog. They look at this and they go, this is the life, man. Oh yeah. Dude, I love traffic. I love MOTs. I love air pollution. I love breathing in rubber from tyres. This is this is what these people are like, right? And it's because they think that everything new, it's the new world order, it's the Illuminati, man. This is what they think. I mean, it's hard to believe, but I've come across loads of people like this. And if you gave them the choice to live in their current city, and 9 times out of 10 they live in a basement, or a 15-minute city where they'd have a nice little house, they'll take the current city anytime. They would sit in the car for 5 hours a day before, even though the car is determined by the so-called Illuminati government. Do you see what I mean? Do you see what I mean? Like, do you see why I use the word hate for these people? Here's another example. Britain blocking the sun. Oh, God, okay. Right, so climate change, I think, is like the boy who cried wolf, right? Because the problem with climate change is that it's one of those things that you don't notice on a day-to-day basis, right? It's not like crime going up or mass migration, like things that you notice on a day, not even day by day, but maybe like a year by year basis. Climate change is something that's slow, right? It's a slow thing. Most people don't notice. It's invisible, right? Because it's a global phenomenon. But the problem is that the same people who tell people that climate change is happening are the same people who say who believe in everything to do with neoliberalism, right? They're the same people who say the economy's going great. Like, oh yeah, the GDP's gone up. That means the quality of life has gone up. They're the same people who say like mass migration has no effect on, it has only positive effects on countries. They're the same people who promote like, like feminism has made women and men happier. Like it's just like things that are so obviously not true, and anyone with half a brain could tell you otherwise. Like no one believes them. But when they say something that's actually true, and climate change is true, no one believes them. They're just like, yeah, you're the same guy who said all the other nonsense. Like, you think I'm going to believe you now? What the Earth is heating up? Okay, buddy. Okay, right. That's what it is. It's the boy who cried wolf. But and so when it comes to climate change, I'm not one of these people who puts my nose up at people who don't believe in it. Right? Like a lot of people watching this won't believe in climate change. You'll think it's like a conspiracy or whatever. Okay, like, I'm not angry at you. I don't blame you. Right? This is a boy who cried wolf situation, but it is happening. I mean, it is happening, and you can crucify me for saying that, but it is. The environment is a genuine concern, and it is happening. But again, I'm not going to lecture you on this. I'm not going to poo-poo you if you don't believe it. Okay, I mean, I don't blame you if you don't believe it. But here's the thing. There's been numerous things to try to stop climate change, right? And many of these have been disastrous, right? Like the sort of mandating electric cars. So you force poor people to buy an electric car, despite the fact that electric cars are not ready for the mass market yet and are still very expensive. And so you're just going to phase out petroleum and diesel cars rather than do what the logical thing to do, which is to subsidise electric cars so poor people can mass adopt them. They've not done that. Forcing people to... In the UK, for example, they're trying to phase out boilers, which are a good thing, right? Phase out gas boilers, for example, so that you get a heat pump in your house. The thing is, they'll only subsidise half the heat pump. So you have to pay the other half. How much is the other half? £12,000, or about €15,000, $15,000. Yeah, the average person isn't going to do that if it's optional. Do you know what I mean? Or introducing like eco zones in like... to protect wildlife in the countryside, so you have to pay a toll fee if you have a petroleum or diesel car, which obviously affects poor people. There's a lot of dumb things that have been proposed to sort of fix climate change, and it's no surprise. Climate taxes, for example, Canada had a problem with that, right? Flight taxes, I think Sweden had a problem with that. If memory serves. Like, there's so many things that have been proposed by the neoliberal elite to try to help fix climate change. Again, proposed for the right reasons, but they're so ignorant of how the masses sort of are struggling right now economically that they keep proposing all these terrible things, and then they're surprised that there's an anti-climate movement. A lot of people who don't believe in climate change, it's not even that they don't believe it. It's that they just don't like the idea of believing in it, because that would mean that they agree with the neoliberal establishment, who clearly has it out for them and wants to make them poorer. But, and by the way, making Greta Thunberg the voice of your movement, yeah, that's a really, really smart move, wasn't it? But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that there's been numerous ways to sort of defy climate change, and one of them that has been proposed is what's called solar geoengineering. And the idea is very simple. Reflect some sunlight away from Earth by spraying reflective particles like sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere to mimic volcanic eruptions, lowering the temperature on the planet, right? So essentially, you would artificially spray some particles in the air. You would hope that these particles reflect sunlight. It cools the planet, right? Now, obviously, this is a very, very, bold thing to do, right? Like, when you think about this, you probably panic and imagine like a million particles in the sky, like, it's at the end of Crystal Maze or something. But, really, that's not really what this is. This is a small scale thing. This is like, hey, what if this works? Like, let's give it a try. Like, let's try this, like, in a remote place, see if it works. Maybe it doesn't. Who knows, right? It's a small thing. This is an early stage small thing. Like, we do not have the technology to do this on a mass scale. This is not really a serious, relevant thing. This is like an early alpha experiment, right? And so Britain approved a small-scale experiment to test the viability of this possibility, right? Like, so somewhere in Britain, in a rural place probably, there'll be some reflective particles sprayed. Hey, let's see if this lowered the temperature or if it didn't. It's a test. It's an experiment. This is not something that we currently have the capacity or the confidence to do, right? Well, The response to that, to hearing that from the Caveman Conservatives, was not on my watch, right? And the reason is very simple. This is the Britain blocking the sun conspiracy. The Caveman Conservative hears about Britain is going to spray particles into the air and to block sunlight, and they immediately take this to its logical extreme. Some of the things that I've heard is a permanent night fog. Britain is going to case the world in a dark cloud so that we have a permanent night and that we never see sunlight again. You know, there'll just be a bunch of particles in the atmosphere like we're Jupiter or something. You know, and you'll never see the sun again, right? We're going to be in a permanent night fog. That's one thing that I've heard this described as. Another thing is a sort of, and I don't even know how this is possible, a Dyson sphere-sized block. We're going to do a cage for the sun. We're going to put the sun in a cage. Keir Starmer's going to press the red button, and then he's going to send a cage to the sun where the sun is covered up forever. It's like we're going to give the sun clothes. You know, and another one has been, a literal giant shield. We're going to put a shield in the sky, a reflective shield that covers the sun. And so all of the sun's rays are reflected. And so we're constantly in the shade, and that will lower the temperature of the planet. But you'll never see the sun again. All you'll see is the shield. Right? All of this comes from, hey, what if we sprayed some reflective particles in the air? Do you think that would have any effect? Well, maybe. Let's give it a try. You know, all of this comes from that. Right? Britain is going to block the sun. Now again, this is like the plot of an Austin Powers movie, except people think it's real. You know, it's like Austin Powers, the sun that blocked me. You know, I can see this now, like Dr. Evil. You know, Austin Powers wakes up in the year 2020, sometime in the 2020s, and he says, Mr. Powers, I have taken over the British government, Mr. Powers. Now, you have 24 hours to give me $1 trillion, or I'm going to block the sun. You know, you can see this as a movie. This sounds like an Austin Powers movie plot. You know, you can just imagine Dr. Evil going, no, no, no. You know, this is it. This is an Austin Powers movie plot, except people believe it. Like, people think it's actually happening. You know, and so again though, critical thinking, if you had some critical thinking, you would ask yourself a question or two. Is modern Britain really capable of such a conspiracy, and why? Modern Britain, the country that I live in, the country that can't even control its own borders, right? That can't even keep its own energy prices down, that can't even convince enough of its young people to join its army because people can't stand the country and the state it's in. No one's patriotic anymore. Can't even control the fluctuation of its own currency, the pound sterling. You think this country can't even control its own rubbish? You know, we've got like bin strikes for like 6 weeks in a row in some parts of the UK. You think a country this dysfunctional, this stupid, this moronically governed can perform a conspiracy that blocks the largest celestial object in the solar system? You think modern Britain, not the British Empire, not the United States, not China, you think modern Britain, the UK, is going to block the sun? Really? You think that this country is capable of blocking the sun? I mean, come on. I mean, and not only that, but why? Why would the British government want to block the sun? Okay, the British government is controlled by the Illuminati. Okay, let's just play devil's advocate. It's controlled by the Illuminati. Why would they want to block why would the Illuminati want to block the sun? Block the sun? What? Why would the Illuminati want an eternal night? Do they not eat food? Are they aliens? Are they lizard people, like what David Icke says? Do they live underground and they don't sustain themselves on like we humans do? Why would they want to why would they want an eternal night? Again, it's just nonsense. It's just like this is a flawed foundation that has led to conspiratorial action, conspiratorial thinking and conspiratorial action. It makes no sense. But people believe it, man. And here's the last one. The Great Reset. Oh man, the Great Reset. So the WEF, the World Economic Forum, is a very out-of-touch elitist organisation, but they mean well. The World Economic Forum is essentially a bunch of rich guys, economists, world leaders, etc. And they meet in a place called Davos in Switzerland. And in order to gain entrance in the World Economic Forum, it costs, like, you have to be rich. You have to be really rich, right? I think you have to pay like over $100,000 just to get in for 1 year, something like that. Don't quote me on that. It's not like I go there. And, it's mostly just a bunch of rich people who, they essentially, it's sort of like it's almost like a status symbol to be a Davos man, as it's called, right? It's like, oh, I'm a Davos man. They talk about the world, but naturally, because everyone there is very rich and very powerful, it's completely out of touch, right? I mean, the things that are proposed in the World Economic Forum are laughable, but they do mean well. It's not, again, they're not like a satanic organization who, sacrifice people behind closed doors or something. It's like, no, they're just a bunch of rich people who usually feel bad about being rich, which is very common for a lot of multimillionaires and billionaires, by the way. And they want to give something back to the plebs, the sort of the common people, and so they sort of bash their heads together and go, how can we make the world a better place, right? And so they come up with all these ridiculous things, we'll go into it, but they do mean well. But again, the cavemen conservatives, they think of them as like the Illuminati, right? Like, this is the Illuminati. But back in 2020, they did this thing called the Great Reset, right? Or they proposed this thing called the Great Reset. And the idea was this: let's use the pandemic as an opportunity to change the way we do capitalism for the better, right? So it's like, okay, we're in a pandemic. The world is going crazy. There's a lot of instability. Now is the time to change the system, right? Because everyone's on edge anyway. Let's use this. Let's use this as an opportunity for change. And what the Great Reset was the following. It proposed some things like shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism, right? So focus not just on investors, but employees, the environment, society, etc., right? So right now, the way capitalism works is it's shareholder capitalism, right? If you have a share in a company, that's all that matters. The job of a CEO is to maximize shareholder value, right? And if he doesn't do that, it's illegal. It's like sabotage. The idea that the World Economic Forum proposed is stakeholder capitalism, right? So it's like, yes, of course, shareholders are important, but you've got to focus on the well-being of the employees as well. You've got to make sure that the company isn't like polluting rivers and lakes and all these things, right? They've got to be good for the world. They're not promoting like terrible things in society, right? Like purposefully, like, it's basically, to be honest, this is quite a socialist proposal in many ways, right? Which is quite interesting. It's sort of like let's focus on the bigger picture, right? Rather than having an every man for himself, you're either in the club or you're out. Every company should sort of think about how are they affecting everything else, right? Like, the idea is that we're all one big society. We're all affecting each other. You can't just be like every man for himself. That's not a bad thing. Another thing was serious tax reforms applied globally. Close down tax haven loopholes and tax the ultra-wealthy more if needed. Right, there's a lot of tax havens across the world. I've been to one, Jersey, right, in the UK. There's tax havens, places where rich people put their money, don't have to pay taxes, right? Close them down. Close Ireland was a tax haven for the European Union for a lot of time. The idea was close these places down. Make companies pay the appropriate amount of taxes. Same thing with rich people. Pay the taxes. And if governments need more tax money to spend, let them spend it, as long as it's necessary. It's not a bad thing necessarily, is it, really? I mean, if you especially in the age of artificial intelligence, this sort of thinking is going to become much more popular. So again, they're thinking ahead of the curve here. This is not dumb. Empower the growth of sustainable industry. Kickstart products and services like electric vehicles, energy efficient retrofitting. Right, again, if we're running out of fossil fuels, or we have to move away from fossil fuels to sustainable energy anyway, because, well, why wouldn't you want to? One of them uses something up, one of them doesn't. Okay, well, let's empower the growth of this industry. Let's support small businesses who want to make products that help the climate out and use less plastic. Clean up the oceans, clean the air. Let's help these companies out. Again, this is not a bad thing. And lastly, ensure artificial intelligence is used for human benefit. Encourage the use of AI in healthcare, education, etc., while keeping it in check. Using AI in healthcare, particularly for diagnosing people, or maybe in the future for even doing things like surgeries and things, could save people's lives. It could make people live a lot longer. It could save you, your life, or someone you know. Or same thing in using AI in education. Could put the load off teachers. So they can pay attention up to a lot more, less stressed. Right. This is not a bad thing. AI is not an evil. It can be used for good, but we have to make sure that it is used for good. That's not a bad proposal at all. Again, basically what I'm trying to say is all these things are cool. The Great Reset, don't quote me on this, but the Great Reset it's not a bad, like, the ideas being promoted are not bad. These are not bad ideas. The problem, however, was the messaging, right? The way that the Great Reset was told to the plebs, the commoners, we common people, was absolutely atrocious. I mean, for example, the pandemic meant people were more uneasy on online, right? People were locked inside their homes by force and are naturally going to be more paranoid. I mean, that's obvious, right? I mean, I don't really understand why they thought it was appropriate to propose a lot of changes to society during a pandemic. I don't understand that logic. No, this is like the time where you don't want to promote change because everyone's on edge and they're dying, they're grasping for some stability. Too many things have changed. People who went out every day are now stuck inside all day, crying into their pillow. Like, this is not a good time to be promoting something called the Great Reset, right? People have had enough change as it is. Very unwise thing to do. And again, the Great Reset implies top-down control, right? Reset alludes to starting from scratch, implying you could have property seized. Oh, we're going to reset the economy. Well, what does that mean? Are you going to take my house away? You're going to take my car away? What are you going to do? You're going to reset the economy? What does that mean? What, you're going to make things more equitable? What, so if I'm doing well, you're going to take it away from me and give it to someone else? Again, the Great Reset, terrible branding. It puts people on edge. It makes people go, oh, geez, reset. I don't like the sound of that. You will own nothing and be happy motto, the worst way ever to describe the ongoing digitization of numerous products. Now, this is a motto, I believe, not from 2020, but 2016, you will own nothing and be happy. The idea behind you will own nothing and be happy is that there's a lot of physical products that will soon go digital. Right, and so a lot of things can be pushed into the cloud, pushed into the online world. I, by the way, completely disagree with this. I don't like this at all. As you know, I love physical products, physical objects. I think we rely too much on the internet and the digital world. But you will own nothing and be happy really means, hey, you won't have to fill your house with a bunch of clutter anymore because everything you need to do will be on the internet anyway. So you'll have a lot more room. Like, you will own nothing, right, as in physical objects, but you will be happy anyway because you'll still be able to do everything that you used to be able to do, but cheaper and more affordably. But again, it's the worst motto ever, right? Because it sounds awful. It sounds like someone's talking down to you, like, you will own nothing, but you will be happy, right? And you just imagine this weird little guy, like, living in a pod, eating bugs, like, I'm happy, Klaus, I'm happy, yay, I've learned to be happy with nothing. Like, that's what it sounds like. It's just the worst branding ever, man. And of course, lastly, very academic impersonal presentations, right? The average person struggled to see the WEF as fellow people, but only elites. It's not like the WEF has charismatic people doing presentations, where they talk to people in a way that they can relate to using comedy, charisma. It's always like some boring economist called, like, Keith, Keith, who's like, yes, the global gross domestic product will increase by 2% next year. And this will lead to much more growth in equitable industries. It's like the most boring. It's like, dude, come on, get some charisma. Like, people don't view the World Economic Forum elites as even people, which is terrible. But they view them as like these sort of incomprehensible, strange alien characters. That's how they're viewed. That's how people view the elites of people like the WEF. But it's their own fault. They don't have charisma. They don't have that sort of human touch because they're totally out of touch. Not cool. All right, this messaging, not cool. You can see why a lot of people viewed the Great Reset as a negative thing. It's their fault. Like, their messaging is horrible, man. It's horrible. And so, again, the WEF is a very out-of-touch elitist organisation, but they mean well. But here's the thing. The Caveman Conservative will go, not on my watch, right? Not on my watch. I don't buy that at all. They believe in the WEF conspiracy, which is essentially that the WEF is the Illuminati. The WEF is essentially the public arm of the Illuminati, the secret society, right? Klaus Schwab, it doesn't, I've got to say, it doesn't help that Klaus Schwab is German, because Germans, and I really don't like this, I think Germans get a bad rap, right? Because people love to like stereotype Germans with evil because they associate Germany with Nazism and fascism, which was obviously the biggest force defeated in World War II, the biggest war of all time. And so people think it's acceptable to sort of stereotype Germans as villains and as evil, even if they're like the nicest people on the planet. And it just so happens that Klaus Schwab obviously is a German. So that's like very unfortunate, really. It's like, yeah, of course, a German guy is the head of the World Economic Forum, which people see as the Illuminati. It's like, man, that's just like so unfortunate in so many different layers. But yeah, they see the WEF as the Illuminati. Right? Because, again, they think that neoliberals are destroying society on purpose. Well, then there has to be an Illuminati behind it. The WEF they use the WEF, the Great Reset, as the public face of that Illuminati. If you talk to a lot of caveman conservatives, they genuinely believe that Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum behind closed doors perform like human sacrifices and things like that, which is just total nonsense. It's just totally ridiculous. But that's what they believe, right? That's what they believe. Okay, so one of the questions that they often ask is, who will stop the World Economic Forum, right? Because if you think that the World Economic Forum is the Illuminati, then you want them to be stopped, right? And so they'll say people like, Donald Trump, right? Sort of a populist leader, someone he's not part of the Illuminati, man. He's a rebel. He's an outsider. He may be a billionaire or whatever, but he's not part of the regime, right? But then, you show them pictures like this and you go, Trump is literally on the same, like holding the same podium as Klaus Schwab did in 2020. Like, look, it's literally the same podium. It's the same background. Like, he's literally right there, right? And people come up with like these sort of comic book fictions, like, Trump is the outsider. He's working against the Illuminati. The Illuminati is the WEF. That's the public face of the Illuminati. And Trump is, when he goes to the World Economic Forum, he's actually confronting them. He's saying, hey, we're onto you, man. Like, we're not going to go along with you. No, Trump's not a part of the Illuminati, brother. Like, he's working against it. And it's like, it's this fiction again. It's like the thunderstorms coming from the sky and the animal sacrifice on top of the mountain. This is the modern day version of that. It's like, neoliberalism is being done intentional by an Illuminati. The World Economic Forum is the Illuminati. Trump is an outsider. He's working against the Illuminati. He's confronting the Illuminati from within on behalf of the people. Lunacy. Total lunacy. Like, in reality, this is a populist leader confronting a bunch of out-of-touch people who don't understand why his brand of populism is successful. Like, that's all this is. That's all it is. There's no comic book romance going on. There's no, like, heavenly hero and, satanic villain. It's like, no, this is literally just a matter of politics. It's a very boring matter. Neoliberalism is out of date. It is ruining society. Trump sort of uses the discontent that people have around neoliberalism to promote himself because he is a psychopathic narcissist. And that doesn't mean he's a bad guy necessarily. He can do a lot of good, but his main aim is to enrich himself. Trump, I'm sure to an extent he cares about his voters and he cares about America, but ultimately he cares about himself, right? And that's what he's doing there. That is what is really going on here between Trump and the WEF and Trump, and on all this political sort of display. It's out of touch people being confronted by populists who are taking advantage of the frustrations caused by the out of touch neoliberals. Does that make sense? But yeah, and so again, a critical thinking question here, for people would be, why would the Illuminati mess up their messaging so badly? Like, why would the Illuminati, these guys who are supposedly so smart that they can take over the world without people even knowing about it, why would they say, you will own nothing and be happy? Like, in order to take over the world, you would have to be in touch with people. Like, if you were a real totalitarian regime, like you control the world and people don't even realize it, you would have to understand, the common people really well. Like, you have to understand how to distract them, you have to understand how to manipulate them, you have to understand everything about them. Why would they mess up their messaging so badly? Why would they say you will own nothing and be happy? Why would they say the Great Reset? Like, why would they mess up so badly? If I was the Illuminati and I controlled the world and people didn't know it, I'd just keep doing what I'm doing. I wouldn't make an organization called the World Economic Forum and put a guy called Klaus Schwab as the leader who, dresses like Darth Vader, like, and then start talking about, we all own nothing and be happy. I just wouldn't do that. Like, I just wouldn't mess up like that. I just keep going. I just go, yeah. Like, let's just keep doing what we've been doing for the last 50 to 100 years. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't, like, use your brain, people. Like, why would they mess that up so badly? If they're that smart, they wouldn't be this dumb, right? Come on. And so, again, we mentioned earlier about the NPC, gullible people who believe everything they are told by the neoliberal elite. These people exist. Like, of course they exist. I'm not going to say NPCs don't exist. We've all encountered an NPC at some point in their life, usually boomers. They worship the TV, right? They worship CNN. They worship Sky News, right? They believe everything they're told. But, these people, the cavemen conservative, they look at the NPC and they go, unlike you guys, I think for myself. I'm not one of these people who believes everything the government tells me. I'm a free thinker. But not really. I mean, in reality, these people are just a reverse NPC, right? They're paranoid people who believe nothing they are told by the neoliberal elite. But whether you're an NPC or a reverse NPC, your lives both revolve around the neoliberal elite. The NPC revolves around what the neoliberal elite tell them. The reverse NPC, the caveman conservative, his life revolves around what they tell him, and he does the reverse. Either way, you're still under their thumb. You're still controlled. Like, you're not by definition, if you're a free thinker, you have the ability to look at everything and independently come to an independent conclusion on each one of those topics, right? Like, that's not what these people do. They just believe the opposite of what they are told. Their default is simply the opposite. If the NPC says 1, they say 0. If the NPC says red, they say blue. If the NPC says day, they say night. They just do the opposite. Like, you are not a free thinker if you just do the opposite of what the establishment says. You're a reverse NPC. You're the same thing in reverse. You're a mirror of the NPC. That's what these people don't understand. And so, the sad thing is that the end game of a caveman conservative's mind is complete and utter madness. I mean, I've known so many of these people. By the way, one of the reasons why I'm making this is because I'm very frustrated with sort of like the 19-year-old me. Because I very much had a lot of these traits. But I've spoken to a lot of cavemen conservatives, and some of the things they come out with are absolutely crazy. Like, their mind is a basket case. Like, 5G is going to give you cancer, or Wi-Fi gives you cancer, fluoride gives you cancer. Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton are working behind the scenes to, dig up Karl Marx from the grave and resuscitate him with AOC in order to burgeon in the new Soviet Union and turn America into the new USSR. Obama is secretly, controlling the media from the shadows, and he's going to use FEMA camps to implement the new world order. And there's going to be like the 90% of the population is going to be wiped out. Like, man, like, the minds of some of these people is just unbelievable. And you just, if you're a rational person, you look at them and go like, oh, like, you're just stupid. Like, how the hell did you end up like this? But the reason is because of the flawed foundation. That's the reason. It's the flawed foundation of the mistake of believing that neoliberals are doing what they're doing on purpose rather than by accident. That leads to this lunacy, all this lunacy that you see on display. It leads to the conspiratorial thinking and the conspiratorial action, but it's a mistake, right? The foundation is the mistake, right? And because the foundation is so ingrained in these people, their mind rots, and this becomes their reality. They live like this, right? It's very sad. And so again, I hope you understand what I mean by the flawed foundation. It leads to conspiratorial thinking, leads to conspiratorial action. This is a big problem that cavemen conservative have. But it's not the only problem. Another problem is what I call the tribal bubble, right? So let's talk about that. I think this one's a bit easier to understand. Cavemen used to live in tribes, and practically all they knew about the world came from said tribe, right? So humans used to live in tribes of a few tens of people, men and women. And, you grew up with each other, your fathers knew each other, you had a tribal elder, a chief or whatever, right? Like, that was it. Like, that was your life. Like, your life was like your tribe. And that it's not like today where, even though you've probably never met me in reality, you might not have never even been in the same country as me, you can still hear me despite you're hundreds, maybe even thousands of miles away, a different country, whatever. Like, you can hear me, you can interact with me, we can even talk. But, it's not like, it wasn't like that back then. Like, your world was your tribe. Everything you knew about the world was your tribe. That's how you learned, right? And so to sort of display this sort of story, I'd like to talk what I call, it's a fictional story, I've made it up, but it gives you an idea. It's called the cow dung story, right? And the idea is simple. So cavemen used to die very, very early, right? The average life expectancy was like 35 or something, 40. But let's say that you had a tribal chief who lived until like 60 or 70, like, whoa, that's like twice the life expectancy. And so the younger, like the 20-year-old cavemen, they go to their tribal chief and they say, chief, like, how are you so old? What's your secret? Like, how have you lived so long? Like, and so the chief, he'll say something like, oh, well, when I was growing up, like when I was your age, when I was like 20, I was tending to the cows and I accidentally fell over and I fell into cow dung, right? I fell into cow poop and I got it all over my elbows and my arms, and no one else has done that, and I think that's why I've lived so long. I think cow dung is the reason why I'm so old. It's a medicine of sorts, right? So again, this is a flawed foundation again, right? And so what would happen after the tribal elder told them that? Well, then they would start rubbing cow dung in their arms and their elbows, right? Because they would go, well, the tribal chief did this, right? The tribal chief lived until 70. He fell into cow dung. I want to live till 70. Here's the cow dung, right? So they would start rubbing cow dung on their arms, right? So, and again, it sounds like a ridiculous story, but this is again, it's a flawed foundation, right? But the point is, it's not just a flawed foundation. It came from the tribal bubble, right? All the information that people had about the world that they lived in, came from the tribal bubble. It came from the tribe. It's not like they had books they could read, or they could just turn on the TV, browse the internet, check out the news, right? No, like their world was their tribe. There was no civilization. This was early days of humans, right? You just had to rely on what other people said. You had to trust what other people said. Your brothers, your sisters, your husbands, your wives. Well, I mean, even marriage didn't exist back then if you go that far back. I mean, the concept, I guess, did. But you get the point, right? Like, information was limited to the tribal bubble. Right? It's not like they could just, look up ChatGPT like, hey, is it true that when a man rubs cow dung on their elbow, he life go longer? And ChatGPT would just go like, dude, what are you talking about? Shut up, you're weird. No, obviously that's not true. They didn't have access to things we have today, right? But the thing is that caveman conservatives also have a tribal bubble that functions in the same way. Caveman conservatives treat each other like a tribe, a trustworthy tribe, and they isolate themselves from all outside information. They only trust their tribe. But who is this tribe? Is it family? Don't be ridiculous. Don't be ridiculous. In the Western world, we have destroyed family for the most part. Families are more distant now than ever. You look in the average family home in the West, and everyone's just on their phone in a different room, living a completely different life, talking to completely different people. Friends? No. I mean, a lot of people don't have friends today, and if they do, they live in a different country or on another side of the country. Very few people live in the same place that all their friends that they grew up with live in. We've spoke about this in the past. Church? I don't think so. I mean, maybe in places like America, which tend to be a lot more religious, but in the UK, the church is barren. Average age, 95. Right? No, of course it's not the church. No, the tribe that caveman conservatives have is social media. Social media is the caveman conservatives' tribe. And so cavemen conservative, they use social media, talk to each other within a bubble, ignoring all outside information, and the information that is presented in this bubble becomes reality, which could explain why they believe in so many conspiracies. I'd like to give 3 examples of this. So one example, of course, is Twitter, or X as it's known. I'll call it Twitter because I'll always call it Twitter. I can't help it. On Twitter, there is a massive caveman conservative bubble, and one of the reasons for that is because of the way that the verification system changed. Because now you can just pay for verification. But of course, if you pay for verification, you're supporting the website, and that means that you support Elon Musk, who owns the website, who is much more aligned with the Trump administration, a much more conservative figure. And so progressives don't want to pay for verification, and so they don't. I used to pay for verification, but at the time of recording, I don't, because I never use Twitter. I don't get enough value out of it, right? If I did, I would. But you get the point I'm trying to make, right? Conservatives pay for verification. Progressives don't. Well, when you pay for verification, you have more algorithmic priority. And so this creates a bubble where conservative voices, not necessarily caveman conservative voices, by the way, but all conservative voices are more promoted than the progressive voices. And now, again, that's the progressives' fault. They could pay for verification, but they don't, right? But the side effect is that it creates a conservative bubble. And if you're a caveman conservative, you will be in that bubble as your tribe. You will treat them as your trusted friends, your family, your church, your accomplices, right? Which sounds very sad, but it is true for a lot of these people. So I'd like to give you some examples of bubbled tweets that would only be possible, would only be liked in this tribal bubble. Right, so why stop at 15 minutes? Right, so we've got a 15-minute city there, and then we've got a 10-minute city, and then a 5-minute city, and then, oh, look, a 1-minute city, and on the 1 minute, so it just gets smaller and smaller, and the 1-minute city is a cell. Oh, I see. So it's like, yeah, right, so in a cell, you have everything you want. You've got the toilet, you've got the sink, you've got the bed. Oh, yeah. So it's like a 15-minute city being closer to a hospital and a university and a church or a supermarket or whatever. It's like, yeah, like if you take that to a ridiculously illogical extreme, it's like you're in prison. Oh, yeah, I get it. So like a 15-minute city is going to lead to a prison planet. Yeah, man, totally. No, total nonsense, right? But again, that's the kind of thing that is promoted. Another one. Britain is working to block out the sun in the name of climate change. This will affect the whole world. They need to stop, right? Again, like just total like fantasy, like total fiction, total like Britain is not capable of blocking out the sun. What are you talking about? But again, this is what's believed. Another example. Klaus Schwab has resigned from the WEF. I still have not eaten the bugs. I still own all my stuff. I still don't live in a pod. I am still happy. Whoa, man. Whoa, nice. Whoa, dude, this is like really brave. Right, this is do you understand what I mean by bubbled tweets? Like, this is the kind of nonsense that is promoted. And I swear, man, like 99% of Twitter is just this now. It's just like people with schizophrenia talking about how they don't want to be put in jail by the Illuminati, like someone's out to kill me. Someone wants to kill me, man. Like this is what Twitter is. And you'll notice it's always verified people. And it's this bubble of people who like they all buy into what each other say and back each other up. It's like, yeah, man, like Britain is blocking the sun. Yeah, man, like Klaus Schwab is the Illuminati. Yeah, man, a 15-minute city like will put us all in a cell. It's like the flawed foundation is backed up in this bubble, and they ping pong off each other, right? Like you've got creators and lurkers, and the lurkers read what the creators say, and it creates this sort of environment. But I want to focus on this tweet here, this whole blocking out the sun thing, right? The following tweets, including the one I just circled, were all made by the same guy, many back-to-back, over the course of just a few days. And I'm not going to tell you who this guy is, because I don't want you to focus on the individual. Who this person is not important. It's about the type of person this person is, the caveman conservative. That's what I want you to focus on. Don't get bogged down by who is this, doesn't matter. It's about the type of person they are. But take a look at some of these tweets, right? Breaking. The British government is set to approve experiments to block the sun to stop climate change. They'll be spraying chemicals into the air to block the sun to lower the temperature. This is literally biological terrorism. Britain is working to block out the sun in the name of climate change. This will affect the whole world. They need to stop. Britain will begin experiments to block the sun to lower temperatures. They'll be spraying chemicals into the air. It's not a conspiracy theory anymore. Sure, if you think this should be illegal. So Britain is now funding geoengineering, where they spray chemicals into the air to change the weather. Didn't people used to be called conspiracy theorists for talking about this? Oh, man, he's got a point. Without the sun, all life on Earth would cease to exist. Britain is planning on dimming the sun to stop global warming. Incredibly bad idea. The climate fanatics claim to be very concerned about not polluting the air with particles. So now they will be spraying particles in the air to block the sun to stop global warming. Make it make sense. Question. When Britain approves spraying particles into the air to block the sun, won't that mean those particles will fall down to Earth as well and cause pollution? Britain will begin experiments to spray particles into the atmosphere to block the sun. They are literally engaging in man-made climate change. Can't make it up. Is there more? I swear there was more. Oh, there's more. Sorry, I thought we were done. I thought, God, there's no way there's more. Is the UN or someone going to intervene to stop Britain from polluting the atmosphere with their plans of blocking the sun? Raise your hand if you agree Britain should be banned from spraying chemical in the atmosphere to block the sun. We are being told that we need solar power for renewable energy to save the planet. We are also being told that they will spray chemicals in the air to block out the sun to stop global warming. So how will those solar panels work? Make no mistake, Britain is planning to experiment with spraying particles in the atmosphere to block the sun. This is an act of biological terrorism on the world. Right, so I just want to say, why would someone, I want you to, this is another critical thinking question, right? Why would someone make the same tweet, what is essentially the same tweet, back to back to back to back to back to back again? Like when I make a tweet, when I have something to say, I just say one thing, which is very rare, and then that's it, I'll leave it. I will not do the same tweet 20 times over like a 3-day period. Why would you do that? Right, well, let's think about this. This person has over 800,000 followers, almost 1 million followers. Well, that means that's a huge following. Well, that means that what he's doing is very successful. I mean, don't listen to no name me. You know, what do I know, right? I mean, this guy is obviously doing much, like he's got much more following. Well, if it works, why would you stop? Right? If it works, why would you stop? But not only that, what about the money? Right? I mean, you get the attention, you get the money, why would you stop? And that's what I want to talk about here. I believe that there's something called the Caveman Conservative Twitter slop conveyor belt, right? And this is how I think it starts. Firstly, a genuinely concerned citizen, like that guy earlier, for example, becomes a creator, publicising their concerns about the neoliberal world online, right? So, you know, Britain's going to block the sun, Britain's blocking the sun, right? So you might actually, like, you start off like you're a genuinely concerned citizen. You're like, oh my God, I'm really scared about what's going on here, right? But then said concerns get picked up within the Caveman Conservative bubble, and they do well, rewarding the creator with attention and a feeling of purpose, right? Like, let's say that you genuinely believe there's an Illuminati that's out to destroy the world, and you're making tweets firing off, disrespecting the WEF, and blocking the sun and the 15-minute city, the Illuminati or whatever. You're going to feel like, damn, man, like, I'm a good guy. I'm a hero. Like, they think that they're like J.C. Denton from Deus Ex or something. Like, I'm fighting against the New World Order. I'm calling them out, right? People love me. Like, I'm important. People look up to me. Oh, man, you know, I'm really special. You know, like that's what you're going to think. Even better, then, the creator becomes captured by their audience in the Caveman Conservative bubble and either intentionally or unintentionally becomes a fantasy factory, telling them exactly what they want to hear while enriching themselves in the process, right? Exactly. So you get captured by your audience. So if you start off being concerned, you're writing about the Illuminati or whatever, people come to you and go, hey man, you're right, you're spot on, like you're totally onto something. Your brain is going to go, I need to do more of this, right? This makes me feel good. I feel important. I feel like a good person. Yep, this is what people want me to do. And so they give their audience, their newfound audience, what they found, what they want to hear. More slop, more slop, more slop. You get one viral tweet about the blocking the sun. Screw it, why not 10 more, right? Hey, am I right, guys? Am I right, tribesmen? That's what it is. That's the psychology behind this. And, you know, if you think about it, it's a mutually beneficial parasitic relationship because the Caveman Conservatives have their misunderstandings about the world reiterated back to them, giving them the illusion of enlightenment while also being part of a tribe of like-minded free thinkers, right? So, you know, you're just a Caveman Conservative, you're browsing Twitter, you see some guy talking about the WEF and blocking the sun and 15-minute cities or whatever. You go, yeah, man, that's what I've been thinking. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, man, you're one of my dudes. Hey, I love this guy. Like, yeah, like, I'm right. I'm right to be paranoid. I'm right to be a schizo. I'm right to, like, it basically makes you feel like you're a smarter person than you really are. Like, the whole world's against you. But me and this guy, we're on the team, man. Like, we back each other up, man. But the creators, at the same time, the creator gets attention, a feeling of purpose, potentially even lots of money, all while getting to engage in a self-romanticizing psychology, being a hero, or even the hero of the story of our time. I mean, being a creator to caveman conservatives, right? That's a really lucrative psychologically, because you constantly get praised. People think you're a freedom fighter. People think that you're a great guy. You get paid for it, right? If you're verified on Twitter, let's say you get paid on Twitter, you might get paid for ad money, right? It's like, and you get to look in the mirror and go, man, I'm a fighter against the Illuminati. Yeah, dude, I'm like JC Denton from Deus Ex. I am a freedom fighter. I'm a free thinker. It feels good, right? So it's a mutually beneficial, parasitical relationship. They both rely on each other. The caveman conservative is nothing without the creators who give him, who show him the mirror and say, yeah, you're a smart guy. We're in this together. But the creator is nothing without people who watch him, right? So both of these are engaging in a parasitical relationship that hurts them both, really, because they're both living in a fantasy world. But at the same time, man, it feels good, eh? It feels good. And, I just want to point out this tweet here. This is another tweet from the Sun guy. He made a tweet called, I'm not far right. I'm just right so far. Because I think for myself and realise that the media is lying. And then he's got this picture of him like this, like, yeah, he's wearing glasses and he's like, yeah, I'm so cool. I think for myself. The media's lying. I'm a free thinker. This is what these people are like. And again, it's no disrespect to this guy. It's no shade to this guy. But there's a million of them like him. And they sort of engage in a self-romanticization, right? Meanwhile, in actuality, what they're doing is peddling fictions to people who are borderline schizophrenic, right? Like, if you really cared about the world, if you really cared about your audience, really, I mean, you would do what I'm doing right now. You would say, hey, if you're one of these people, get a grip, because you're living in a fantasy world. And I mean, you would try and help your audience out. And they might not like you for it. They might say that you're an elitist or you're rude or whatever, but at least you're trying to help them, right? Like, that's when you can be self-romantic. That's when you can start kissing yourself in the mirror about how much of a great guy you are. When you're actually trying to help the people rather than just sort of give them the slop that they want to hear. The WEF, the Illuminati. Come on, And these, the creators, it's hard to tell whether they're doing it intentionally, like they're just going along with it, like the grifters, as people like to say, or whether they actually believe it. In the case of this guy, I think he's legitimate. I think he really does believe the delusions that he spouts. But a lot of people are like this, and it's just so sad. That's one example. Another example would be YouTube, right? YouTube. Oh my God, YouTube. I mean, it's not as bad as Twitter, but it's well known. It's a well-known psychological fact that most people do not like to be challenged on their views. After all, being challenged means you could find out you are wrong and thus require a change, of which can be a painful process. On the contrary, people respond much better to having their views or even fantasies regurgitated back to them like a mirror. Most online creators learn this very quickly, right? It's exactly what I just said. If you make something to someone that challenges their preconceived notions, their beliefs, they'll hate you. They won't like you. They won't be like, oh man, thanks so much for telling me this. This has been life-changing. Like, no, they'll say, screw you, dude, you're wrong. Like, and not only are you wrong, you're evil, right? That's what they'll do. And 99% of YouTube is just people who have found an audience who already know everything that the creator says, and they just want a pat on the back and be told that they're a really smart person. Oh, you're so smart, right? You're really smart. You're all so smart, right? Very rarely is there people on YouTube who will be like, listen up, I think you're dumb, and this is why, right? It's very rare, right? But it's rare because it's not what people like. It's not what people want to hear. And I believe that there is a caveman conservative bubble on YouTube as well, where a lot of creators purposefully create things to a specific kind of demographic of caveman conservatives, a sort of niche, and they just make a lot of money on it, right? They just ride the gravy train. by just making essentially the same thing over and over again. There's a genre on YouTube that I call apoco slop. And the idea behind apoco slop is it's a bunch of people, caveman conservatives, who they think that like civilization is about to end. They're kind of like doomsday preppers, if you've heard of them. Like they think that there's going to be a nuclear war any second now, and that we're going to go back to like the world's going to be like a Fallout game. You know, it's like going to be a nuclear wasteland. Society's going to collapse. Anarchy's going to happen. There's going to be no government. The economy's going to collapse, man. We're going to be trading with bottle caps. The dollar's going to be worthless. You won't even wipe your backside with it. Right, these kinds of people. I'm sure we've all encountered them. And these are people who are usually the biggest losers on earth. I'm not trying to be rude, but they are. It's like they hate their own lives. They're either unhappy with their job, unhappy with their partner if they have one. They're just unhappy in general. Like they're very unfulfilled people, and they have this fantasy that if society collapsed, and there's a lot of problems with society today. Neoliberal society is evil, right? It's terribly evil. But they have this fantasy where if society collapsed, that they would become like Legate Linnaeus from Fallout New Vegas, right? They would conquer the wasteland. Like, oh yeah, I'm in this life I may work in Walmart. But hell, man, if after the bombs drop, I'm going to be the warlord, right? I'm going to be the king. That's what they think. And so they crave the apocalypse. They crave, like, the end of civilization. Like, they actually want people. They want the world to end, basically. But in reality, they don't really want the world to end. They're delusional. It's because they despise their own lives, but they're too narcissistic to admit that they've made bad decisions and to make the appropriate changes in their lives. And so they just cross their fingers that everything's going to collapse. It's like if I'm not happy, no one can be. It's very immature. And there's a genre called apoco slop that sort of promotes this sort of dribble. I'll give you some examples of apoco slop. Right, so these are some thumbnails that I've found. China's economy is collapsing, and it's far worse than you expect. $17.8 trillion disaster. Market will crash 80%. If you want to profit from this massive crash, do these 5 things. Hold your cash. Most people have no idea what's coming. Warren Buffett's last warning. Warren Buffett's still alive, isn't he? Everyone will be wiped out. Brace yourself. America is on the verge of economic war, dude. The US is not ready for what's about to happen. This wasn't supposed to happen. Supposed. UK won't make it to 2026. Oh my God, we're not going to make it. Oh my God, I've got to tell everyone we're not going to make it. The UK is not ready for what's about to happen. Dude, we're not ready. We're not ready. Massive crash. Urgent investors are preparing for a massive stock market crash. Oh my God. It's over. It's over. It's over for Tesla. Tesla stock is melting down. Right, so this is this is an example of apoco slop, right? More like economically based apoco slop. And it's like, yeah, dude, like everything's gonna come down. Yeah, dude, you might be a loser, but all the winners will soon be losers as well. So isn't that cool? And the kind of people who watch this stuff are the kind of people, again, like I said, they're not doing well. They want the successful people to fail. It'll make them feel better about themselves. They want the anarchy. They want the sort of nuclear wasteland. And this kind of stuff appeals, whether intentionally or not, to people like that. And this is very successful. This is a lucrative market. 1 million subscribers. Over 1 million people have saw videos like that and gone, yeah, I want to see more of that. That's what I want to see. Do not ever, when I say, that this is lucrative, do not disbelieve me when I say that people want their fantasies indulged. And you can be very successful on YouTube if you indulge people in their fantasies. Sometimes I look in the mirror and I go, man, I wish I was like a worse person. I wish because I could easily, make something like this. I could make like a video a day that says like, I don't know, Klaus Schwab's in the Illuminati and he's gonna, kill your dog or something. You know what I mean? Like, or I could easily garner an audience, of like Neanderthals who would believe in this rubbish that I put towards them. But instead, what do? I aim for the intellectuals. I aim for the people with a brain. I make these damn, multiple hour long lectures and, and look for the intelligent people who can understand what I'm talking about. What? Sometimes I look in the mirror and I go, why can't I be a manipulator like this. I know that sounds ridiculous. I know some people will laugh at me saying that, but I honestly do. Sometimes I go, man, I wish I had less morals. I do. I wish I had less morals sometimes. And here's another example, the boomer slop genre, right? So there's a lot of boomers, like people who are like, the parents fought in World War II, and they're obsessed with war, right? They're obsessed with like, I don't know, World War II, but wars in general. And whenever a war kicks off, these boomers who have never fought in a war, most of them were like avoiding the draft of Vietnam, right? They were listening to like the Beatles in a field, right? But now that they're old and mostly bitter, they go like, oh, I'm just like Daddy. Daddy fought the Nazis in World War II, and if the Nazis were here today, I'm just like Daddy. If there was World War III today and I was a young man, which they conveniently aren't, of course, they would say like, oh, I'd be on the front lines, just like my father. Meanwhile, it's like, no, you wouldn't. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you're a draft dodger. What are you talking about? And so there's this boomer slop where all they do is talk about wars, like modern wars, and they talk about like it's almost like they view it like popcorn, like they eat popcorn, and they'll talk about like how many soldiers have died in the Ukraine war today or whatever, and they'll be like, oh, 1,000. I would have been one of them. If I wasn't 60 years old, I would have been one of them. Brave heroes, it's like they get off on sort of like young men dying, because they can live out this fantasy of being their daddy, being, who was a young man who almost died, right? Do you understand what I mean? Boomer slop. Here's some examples of boomer slop. Russia will never recover. Ukraine just delivered a devastating blow to Russia. Devastating blow. Russia's done. Russia is done. New Ukrainian laser slices through Russian aircraft like butter. Whoa, dude. Greatest weakness exposed. Putin's military nightmare. His army is collapsing. But victory is close. Ukraine goes all in. Massive counteroffensive begins. I love the facial expressions on these thumbnails, by the way. It's always like, oh. God forbid if I ever became a world leader, there'd be some like 20-year-old making videos of me with my face going, God, I would just do my head in. Russian general and North Korean troops wiped out. UK's storm... This is us. Ooh. UK's Storm Shadow missile decimates Russian general and North Korean forces. Oh, yeah. You show them, Storm missile. Russia erased in seconds. They're done. It's over. 1, 2, they're gone. It's finished. Russia would be removed from map. Removed from map. Not removed from the map. Removed from map. It's not even grammatically correct. Removed from map. 500,000 people removed from map. 500,000 people clicked on a video that says removed from map. Honestly. I just... This is how China ends. Oh yeah, China, of course. That's another boomer sort of enemy. China's collapse is closer than you think. China, really unstable country right now. Yeah, unlike Britain and the European Union and America, who are notoriously stable. Yeah, it's China that's on the verge of collapsing. Russia can't recover. It's officially over for Russia. Worst month ever. Done. Gone. It's over. Do you see what I mean by boomer slop? It's like the stereotypical enemies of like, Russia, the commies, China, the commies, brought into the modern era. They're done. It's over. They're collapsing. Our troops are kicking their backsides, and you would have been one of our troops as well if you were just 20. If you weren't 60, you would have been involved in this victory. Pat yourself on the back, my boomer friend. Oh, God, you see this all over the place, and these are hugely successful. Oh, my God. And again, 1.6 million. 1.6 million people every day pretty much look into this. Again, I'm not going to name these creators because I have nothing against them necessarily, right? I don't know if they're intentionally, being grifters or whatever. Maybe they believe this themselves. But hey, it's lucrative, right? It's definitely slop, but it's lucrative slop, okay? And so again, it's the same sort of thing, right? It's the conveyor belt. It's like, it's a mutually beneficial relationship. The creators, the sort of the apoco slot people, the boomers, they get these videos, pushed in front of them. The videos say exactly what they want to hear. thumbs up, the creators get money, I assume, more attention, it gives their lives some purpose, they can self-romanticize about how much of a good heckin' person they are. It's like, it's the same thing as Twitter, right? It's the same conveyor belt, it's the same parasitical relationship, right? And lastly, another example, and this example is very different, 4chan, all right? Now, everything that I've said about Twitter and YouTube, it does not apply to 4chan, right? Because 4chan's anonymous, right? It doesn't have creators necessarily. It doesn't necessarily have like personalities. It's an anonymous board. Like every post on there is done for the love of the post. It's done from the love of the game. It's not about making money. It's not about necessarily getting attention. So it's a much more different kind of dynamic. But 4chan does have a caveman conservative bubble, and I want to be clear, I'm not saying that everyone who uses 4chan is in a bubble, or that everyone who uses 4chan is a conservative, or that everyone who uses 4chan is a caveman conservative. Same thing with the other platforms. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that there is, on parts of 4chan, a caveman conservative bubble, right? People who live in a bubble and they sort of back each other up with their delusions based on flawed foundations, and they use this is what's different. On Twitter and YouTube, you have creators that give their viewers slop, right? 4chan's different. 4chan, there is no creators and there is no viewers. Everyone, you have lurkers and posters, right? But everyone is sort of on the same equal playing field. There's no hierarchy, necessarily speaking, apart from the janitors, I guess. But the way it works is people use slang and memes to sort of signal to each other that you're part of the team. Like, hey, you're one of us, right? You're an enlightened one. You're in the bubble, right? And so, take Wojaks and Soyjaks, for example. I mean, these are very common things that you see on the internet all the time, right? Like, they're pretty normal things, right? Like, this one, for example, which I've used is used to like point at something, and it's funny, right? I mean, this is pretty commonly used on the internet, right? These things. I don't know how. I would have, I made a prediction last year that we would stop using these, to be honest, and maybe we would have found something else. But it's one of those things that, like, the internet's in a bit of a cultural stasis at the moment. It's like we've still got these and they're not going anywhere, but whatever. The point is that Wojaks and Soyjaks, common internet culture, right? Everyone's seen them. They're often used, right? But the thing is that on 4chan, when you're in a bubble, what you have an increasing levels of bizarreness, right? So the Wojaks, for example, they just get weirder and weirder and more esoteric, right? So, for example, what is that? What is this? Like, can anyone explain this to me? Warning, may start talking about purrs. I love eating purrs, love purrs, 47 purrs eating today. Number one purr fan, purrs inside. Don't talk to me until I've had my purr. What's going on? Like, you on 4chan, you will... 4chan culture, it has these sort of esoteric... You've got the base Wojak and Soyjak, but then they build on top of it this increasing level of bizarreness, this increasing esotericism, where it gets weirder and more subtly referenced to the point where it's like you just don't really understand what you're looking at eventually. Another example here. What's this? What is this? What am I looking at? It's like a deep fat fryer with a face. What is this? Like a deep fat... In what universe is this ever applicable in any situation? In any scenario? I can't even fathom why someone made this, But that's the point I'm trying to make. When you're in the bubble, the base Wojak and Soyjak, that's not good enough. You've got to get more and more ridiculous, more and more esoteric, more and more weird, to the point where I'm faced with a deep fat fryer with a face. What? You know what I'm saying? Like, what's going on? And this last one, this is very like... I mean, what am I looking at here? Like, the more you look at this, the weirder it gets. It's like a woman, I guess, like, raised by a single father or something, and the father's disappointed with her, and she's a neat, like a femcel neat who lives in a room and never leaves the room, and the room's a mess. This is like half the women I know. But it's like, like what's, it's like the more you look at it, I showed someone this image after I found it, and they said to me, it looks like something an AI would make trying to imitate a human. Like there's something alien about this. Like it's so detached from humanity that it almost doesn't even come across as something a human being would even make. But someone made this. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is what I mean by increasing levels of bizarreness, esotericism, confusion. You would only understand if you're in the bubble. You would only understand, like, everyone else is just, like, looking at this, like, what's going on? There's a wheelbarrow of pee there with a note attached to it, man. What's going on? It's just like, do you understand what I mean? Like, the bubble, more esoteric, more strange, more bizarre. Like, this is like trying to figure out what Egyptian hieroglyphics mean. Like, if you're just a normal guy and you look at this, you're not in the bubble, and you're looking at pears and a deep fat fryer with a face and whatever the hell's going on there, it's like trying to read the pyramids. In fact, it's probably easier to read the pyramids. The pyramids are less esoteric than whatever these are. Do you know what I mean? And, don't even get me started on the slang. You can always tell when someone has used 4chan as their tribe, their bubble, like using it as a sort of substitute for a community, friends and family, because they start to talk in this sort of slanguage. So, for example, that feel when. Everything becomes a that feel when. That feel when, I like that feel when, I don't know, everything becomes a that feel when. I can't even give an example. Like, they use this for everything. Like, that feel when, I don't know, I have no water. That feel when I want to eat a chicken nugget. That feel when, I don't know, your girlfriend stinks. You know what I mean? Like everything's like got a that feel when. And it's like there's no like the normal ways to communicate. Like, I would like some water, for example. No, it becomes that feel when no water, right? And it's just like, what am I meant to understand what you mean by that? Here's another one, my face when. Now, my face when was like you would attach a picture of a face and then go my face when something, right? Makes sense. But people just say my face when without even an image attached. It's just like, my face when a nuke goes off. Well, what's your face? There's no face. You've not attached a face. You're just saying my face when, right? It's like, do you know what I mean? It's because it's been ingrained into them. Like, you should say that feel when, my face when. You should say it. They forget how to talk like a normal human. This is another one. Coal and gem. Have you heard of this? I've never heard of this. I used to do a radio show called Hex Radio, right? And occasionally I would make the mistake of inviting listeners on the air to talk to me. And I remember one time I had a listener on the air and I was reading something out and he kept yelling, coal, gem, coal, gem. Like, I would say something and he would go, coal, and I would go. I thought he was playing Minecraft or something, like maybe he had his mic unmuted. I don't know, like or maybe he had Tourette's. Oh, I don't know what I was thinking. But I would read something and he would go, coal. And then I would read something else, he would go, gem. And eventually I said, excuse me, what's the coal? What are you doing? Like, why are you yelling coal, gem? And he says, oh, coal means something's bad. That's coal. Gem means something's good. That's gem. Can anyone in this bubble confirm or deny if this is the case? Please, because I have no idea if what I'm saying is true, but that's what he told me. I feel, you don't want to know the biggest reason I hate this slang? It makes me feel old. I'm in my 20s. I feel like I'm 50 talking about this sort of stuff. But, but it was like he got so used to calling things coal and gem that he couldn't help but blurt this out. He started talking like a meme. He started talking like a green text. And again, I know some people will say I'm being overly dramatic talking about this, but I'm not. Like, we've all got that one friend who uses 4chan too much and he starts talking like a green text. The people who live in their bubble too much, they make 4chan their community, their family, their friends. They forget how to talk like a normal human being. Another example, X-maxing. Like, whenever someone's, like, let's say someone goes to the gym to get muscles. Oh, you're muscle maxing. Someone, eats a McDonald's. Oh, you're fat maxing. Oh, you're trying to, I don't know, get a date. Oh, you're man maxing. Woman maxing. Everything's a maxing. It's like we're in some sort of video game simulation, maxing out our stats. Maxing. You can't get away from it, man. Everything's maxing these days. That one annoys me. But the biggest nuisance to me is the word normie, normie, normie. I absolutely hate it when people call other people normies, because there's this thing I call a not a normie effect, and the idea is you've got a bubble, right? Whether it's 4chan, Twitter, it's not just 4chan I'm talking about here necessarily. I've seen people use this on Twitter and YouTube as well, where they'll say like the normies. And what is a normie? It's someone outside of the bubble, right? Outside, who doesn't understand the esoteric slang or the esoteric references. They're a normie, they're a normal person. And it's like, I just think to myself, like, what, and that's a bad thing? Like, it's a bad thing that they don't understand what the deep fat fry or Wojak means? Oh, I'm pretty happy I don't understand what the deep fat fry or Wojak means. I will die a happy man. If I had a heart attack right now, I would have no regrets not knowing what the deep fat fry or Wojak means. I would have no regrets. It's like, normie is not even, it's not an insult. It's almost like a compliment. It's like someone who says, it's like saying, you're someone who did not waste their time in this cultural bubble on the internet that is ultimately meaningless and an echo chamber, and is just an absolute recipe for madness and disaster, right? That's what it means. It really annoys me when people think that they view themselves as some sort of enlightened being, like, oh yes, I'm a genius because I understand the deep fat fry or Wojak, but you're a normie. You're just a peasant, and you're just an imbecile. It's like, in reality, is it just that there's someone who hasn't wasted their time? I mean, it's a controversial thing to say, right? But maybe you understand what I mean. But there is a certain irony to this, though, right? Because ironically, such a bubble serves as the prime exporter of internet culture. It's incredible when you look at 4chan, just how much of this one little website has had such a great big effect on the internet at large. Because when something spawns on 4chan, it quickly spreads to Twitter and to YouTube, right? After it's spread to Twitter and YouTube, it will go to Reddit and Instagram, right? Which people would say would be the normie net, right? And then after that, it goes to Facebook and like the legacy media, like the boomers then figure it out, right? And by that point, when the rhetoric, when the meme has reached that point, it's out of date, right? I want to make it clear, like, I'm not poo-pooing 4chan or people who use 4chan. I know that a lot of my friends use it. I'm sure that you might use it. I'm not poo-pooing 4chan as a website. You have to respect the sort of how it is the genesis of so much memeticism, and how it serves as a place of sort of borderline unbridled discussion. It's much better than Reddit, where everything gets you make a post and some dork says, "Oh, sorry, I'm removing this because it didn't apply to Rule 2," as if anyone's going to read it anyway. Like, you've got to give 4chan some credit. Like, it's in many ways, like, this is a genius website in many ways, but it is a problem when people use 4chan as a bubble, a replacement for friends, for family, for religion, necessarily. Yes, you can use 4chan as a replacement for religion, believe it or not. There's a lot of sort of esoteric, mysticistic cults that spawn from niche parts of the internet. Let's not pretend as if that's not true. But you understand the point I'm trying to make, right? Like, it's not good when people use this as their tribal bubble, because you'll end up forgetting how to speak. You'll end up being so engrossed in layers of esoteric memes that you'll just become a mess. And I've seen this in people I know, and trying to shake them out of it, like, can you stop saying "my face" every 5 seconds? Or when they type and they do that bloody, they're like they're typing a green text. God, just stop doing that. It annoys me so much. You know who you are. Anyway, you get the point. But anyway, whatever the website, all of these tribal bubbles ultimately serve the same purpose. Fills a void of community. We've talked about that. Creates an us versus them scenario. We've talked about that. But here's what it also does. It isolates from outside influence. When you're in a bubble, you're surrounded by like-minded people, you're tribesmen. You like them, they like you, you're all on the same page. Outside information, you don't want to hear it. You're isolated from it. And being in a tribal bubble gives caveman conservatives the unearned confidence to willfully isolate themselves from outside influence. They don't read books. Every book is propaganda. They don't read television. Everything on television is Illuminati propaganda. They don't browse anywhere else on the internet. That's like, woke, moderated, whatever. They don't read the newspapers. They're not interested in the news. It's all fake, whatever. Now, let me make it absolutely clear. You're not wrong. Like, a lot of television is terrible these days. It's literal propaganda, like neoliberal garbage. A lot of the internet is moderated garbage, Reddit, right? Overly moderated garbage. A lot of the mainstream media is ridiculously, garbage, right? I love that word. But I will draw the line on one thing, and that is books. I can understand people not wanting to watch television, not wanting to browse other websites or to read mainstream media or whatever. But I have no patience with people who don't read books, who think that all books are propaganda. No, stop right there, criminal scum. You are not going down that route. In Britain, fun fact: reading often serves as a class signifier, right? So if you're part of like the overclass or the upper class, these people typically read a lot. Like that, you'll go into their house or whatever, and they'll have like kind of like a library like this here, where there'll be like loads of books. They'll have like a family library, and you go in the family library, take a book out, put it in your room, put it back when you're done. These people love to read, and they read a lot. Admittedly, they usually read like neoliberal biographies and like not they don't read good things, but they can read the classics and things like that as well. The middle classes are like iffy. They're like 50-50. You go into a middle class person's house, they'll have like a little bookcase, but the books will be like, it's there for show. Like everything in the middle class lifestyle in Britain, it's not real. It's there for show. They'll have like books there that signify like social, like hey, I'm one of the good guys. Like some anti-racism book or some feminist book. Have you read Andrea Dworkin? The question of every midwit, and so they'll have these books on this like small bookcase, usually in their living room, usually covered in dust. They've never actually read them, or they'll get round to reading it when they've got time, but they never have time. And so it's just a way to like signal to other people, hey, I'm sophisticated. I read books as well, right? Again, typical middle class imitating the upper and over classes. The working classes and the underclasses, however, if you go into their houses, they'll never have a book. Right, they'll never have a book. They'll have no bookcase. They might have like one book, maybe that's like a footballer's biography that's covered in dust, and like they've opened the first page, realised, hang on, I have to read. There's no pictures, and then they've just gone, forget about it. Right, like working class people and underclass people, especially, there are exceptions, obviously, typically do not read. Right, they just don't do it. They're more obsessed with the television. Right, like the underclasses in Britain are obsessed with the TV. And I actually have a bit of a story I'd like to tell about this, but let me get some water first before I tell this story because, geez, this is something. All right, so I'm going to tell you a story called The Schizo House Story. And, I used to know this guy when I was in primary school, so we're really young, and he lived in a bungalow, so no second floor. And it was only him, his mother and father, right? So three people. And they had a pretty small house, but it was a nice house, cozy house. Anyway, I'm going in there, and I'm going there to play GTA San Andreas in my friend's bedroom, which probably wasn't wise considering we were only about 7 or whatever. But I digress. So I go in the living room, enter the house. First thing I see is a TV. Now that's not much of a big deal, right? Because, a living room is where the TV goes, right? I'm pretty sure everyone has a TV in the living room. If you're going to have a TV, it goes in the living room. But then anyway, I go in the dining room on my way to my friend's bedroom, and I noticed they have another TV in there. And I thought, well, that's strange, because the living room and the dining room had no door. It was like an archway, right? And so I didn't understand, like, why would you have one TV on one side of the wall and then another TV on the other side of the wall? Because you can hear both of them on at the same time, right? Like, you can always hear the dining room TV in the living room. And I just thought to myself, that's strange, but whatever. Anyway, on my way to my friend's bedroom, I look into his parents' bedroom, and which I probably shouldn't have done, admittedly, but I couldn't help it because I heard something really loud. There was a TV in there, and it was on. His parents are not in their bedroom, by the way. They just have a TV on in their bedroom, seemingly all day. Okay, whatever. Anyway, I go into my friend's bedroom, and obviously he has a TV because, we're playing on the Xbox or whatever. So that wasn't a surprise. Anyway, I eventually, we're drinking like Vimto or whatever, and I say, hey, do you mind if I go to the bathroom? And he says, oh yeah, it's just through the kitchen, down the hall, on the left or whatever. So I'm like, thanks. So I go into his kitchen, and of course there was a TV in the kitchen, a little TV. All the others were like 50-inch or something. This is like a small, it looks more like a computer monitor, right? It's a little TV, and that's on, and I'm like, okay, well, whatever. Go into the bathroom, I accidentally went right, right? So I went into the spare room, couldn't help but notice there's a TV on in there as well. This is a room that has like a washing machine in it with a bunch of dirty laundry or whatever, and there's a TV on in this room. And I'm like, man, like what is going on in this house? And I call it the schizo house because it was like every room had a TV and every room had it on. So like when you were walking through the house, you could hear like a million voices. It felt like you had schizophrenia. What I imagine schizophrenia is like, where you can hear voices through the walls. It's like, one room had golden balls, another room has family fortunes, another room has Top Gear, another room has like my friend playing San Andreas GTA, another room has like Cash in the Attic, and there's just like a million like voices, like blah 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 blah. It's like wherever you are in the house, there's like you just can't hear yourself think, and I genuinely was like, I was thinking to myself, like, what is going on? Like, why do they have a TV in every room? And why is it on? But then, folks, I'm not joking with you. I go into the bathroom, and you're not going to believe this. There's a TV in the bathroom. In the bathroom, they had a television. So I'm sat there, taking a dump. And again, it's not just this TV that I can hear. I can hear a million TVs. I can hear like a million voices through the walls, hey, right? And I'm sat there taking a dump. I look to my right, and I'm about to find out whether Martin from Shropshire is about to win £32,000 on the 50-50 who wants to be a millionaire question. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm sat there thinking, and I'm thinking to myself, why would anyone want a TV in their bathroom? I have never been in the shower and thought to myself, man, you know what this needs? Squid Game. That's what this place needs. Like, I have a rule, and it's a bit of a weird rule, but it's a rule. When my nuts are on display, no display, right? When I'm naked, there's no display, right? Put it away, right? Put the display, when nuts on display, no display, put it away, right? I know there's some people, some weirdos, who they use their smartphone when they're having a poo, or when they're having a pee. And I just think to myself, I think you're a very strange person if you do that. Like, really, you can't put your phone down even when you're having a poo or a pee? I mean, a poo and a pee is like one of the greatest gifts that humans can have. Like when you've had a lot of fibre and you take a big dump and it all just comes out like a volcano, that's one of the best feelings in the world, to feel empty, Or when you've held in a pee and you pee it out and it's like, oh man, what a relief. It's one of the best feelings in the world. You would rather use your phone than enjoy the pleasure that God gives you from having a poo and a pee? I think you're crazy. I think you're totally out of your mind. But apparently and do you not have concerns about, like, what if you like accidentally turn the camera on your app and you're just sat there taking a dump? Do you know what I mean? Like, I used to know this guy, and he had no problem like talking to me on Skype, that's how long ago this was, while having a pee. Like, you'd just be talking to him about like, hey, so how's it going? And all you'd hear in the background is, oh yeah, dude, it's going pretty well. It's like, can you not put the phone down and come back to me when you're done? Can you not just enjoy the poo? Having a poo and having a pee? Do I need to be connected at all times? I just don't understand people these days. But anyway, I'm sat there in this bathroom and I'm thinking to myself, what is going on with this? Like, what is going on here? Like, what's with this TV obsession? And I went to my friend and I said, buddy, like, what's the deal with the TV thing? Right, like, what? And he says to me, what TV thing? As if I'm being completely ridiculous. Like, huh? What? I say, no, you've got a TV in every room, right? And he goes, yeah, right. And he goes, and it's on. And he goes, right, yeah. And I'm like, why? Why have you got a TV on in every room? Like, do your parents not get a headache? I thought, like, is this some sort of condition? Like, maybe they have tinnitus or something. And, like, maybe they, like, need something on in the background. Because I knew people who had, like, the nature sounds in the background to get to sleep. Like, is it that kind of thing? Like, and he looks at me and he's like, I don't know, I never thought about it. Like, it's just a totally normal thing. Like, oh, yeah. Oh, true. Like, maybe we shouldn't have a TV in every room and a TV on in every room where you can hear a million voices no matter where you are in the house. Like, oh, I never thought of that before. The weird thing is his parents were like totally normal people. So I have no idea what was going on there, but it was like, apparently they had it's like in Britain we have this problem with the working classes and the underclasses, that they're obsessed with television. And all they can do is watch things. They can't read things. They have to watch things. They need the explosions. They need the flashing lights. They need the, it's like, this is like TikTok before TikTok. That's what TV was. It was like, like we have a massive problem with attention spans and paying attention and using your imagination and creativity. And I like to think of that family was like that taken to an illogical extreme. It's like they thought that a room wasn't a room unless it had a TV in it and unless it was on. It's almost like mind-blowing to me that these people exist in a way. And the fact that if you grew up in a house like that, you'd think it was totally normal. Like, you'd think it was normal to grow up in a house where no one reads and there's a television on all the time in every room, even in the bathroom. Like, that is imagine living like that. Imagine growing up and that's like normal to you. Silence is like, it feels weird. Man, it's imagine the energy bill, But anyway, the point I'm trying to make talking about this is that caveman conservatives flat out never read. They will read social media. They'll watch things, but they won't read, right? Just like how the British working classes and the underclasses don't read. They're just obsessed with television. They're obsessed with social media. All they can do is read social media and obsess about social media. Books are just propaganda to them. Books are just like, what's a book? That's for dorks. If you confront a caveman conservative and say, why don't you read? They'll say, it's for dorks, it's propaganda, it's all liberal. And let's be honest, there are some absolutely horrendous books out there today. I mean, I'm sure if you've ever been to a library lately, you'll see books like, Oops, I Fell in Love with My Plumber. It's like a femcel fantasy book. You've got like some woman self-inserting herself into the story. She looks like Jabba the Hutt, right? And she just happens to fall in love with Giga Chad, the plumber. This 6'5" guy who's a billionaire who just so happens to also be a part-time plumber for some reason, who just so happens to be madly in love with her for some reason. And it's like this sort of romantic fantasies, like, oh my God, there's loads of these books now all over the place. And women love them. They can't stop reading them. And that's one type of book. Another problem is, books like The Truth About Race. Why white people are the devil. It's like woke academia, just racist garbage, sort of presenting itself as like enlightened academia. You're just too immature to understand the complex sociology. No, it's like you're just an anti-white racist. That's what you are. Why men are evil. Why men are animals. It's like, no, you're just a sexist against men. It's just woke academia. Yeah, there's a lot of books like this. There's no doubt about it. And lastly, you've got books like 100 Reasons Why I Effing Love Puppies. I call this Millennial Edge. Like books with swear words in the title. And it's always the same book. It's always like, you shouldn't tolerate any disrespect. I'm a 6'5" tattooed manly dude, but when I was young, I used to get bullied. Not anymore. I don't tolerate disrespect from anyone. And it's like, geez, like God, like how many books like this do we need writing? Like, yeah, there's no doubt. Like, there's a lot of absolutely horrendous books out there today that are propaganda. But that doesn't change the fact that good books are the greatest way to obtain high quality information. I can put up with people not watching television. I can put up with people not reading the news. I can put up with people not browsing, the mainstream internet or whatever. I have no tolerance for people who can't read books. If you don't read books, and when I say you don't read books, I'm not saying like maybe you only read a book once a year, once a month, once a week, whatever. No, I'm saying like if you don't read at all, like the last book you read was Of Mice and Men in school, right? I'm sorry, but you've been failed and you've failed yourself and you need to get your finger out your backside because you're missing out on something here. Like, you are never going to understand the world if you don't... I've tried to explain this in the past. Like, there are some terrible books, but there's a lot of good books, and books have publishers, and it's not easy to get your book published, believe it or not. And so you have, well, it is in some circumstances, self-publishing, for example, but a lot of publishers have a reputation to defend, and they won't just publish any garbage. And a lot of books, they have endless, thousands of hours put into them with numerous sources at the end, and it's like, a lot of these books are absolutely fantastic. And it's like the amount of effort that has been put into these books is way more than just some guy making a tweet, or even making a video. Like, I like to, with my lectures, I try to make them as close to a book as possible. That's why they're quite long. That's why they're quite like in depth. But even these don't match a good book, Like, if you don't read books, you're missing out on something. And I don't care what you read. Like I can't. You might be thinking, well, give me a book to recommend. I don't know you. Like I'm not here to. I don't know what you like. Like what do you like? What are you into? Like you should know what you're into. Then find a book written by someone who you respect, who and then read that book. I can't give you recommendations. What I will say, however, is I don't care if the book is as infantile as Captain Underpants and the invasion of the incredibly naughty cafeteria ladies from outer space and the subsequent assault of the equally evil lunchroom zombie nerds, or something as in-depth and magnificent and hard to fathom as the Holy Bible. The benefits will prove endless. You have to read. Even if you're reading something childish and stupid, you have to read. It will improve your attention span. It will improve your imagination. You'll be able to take... It says so much about someone. I think it's impossible for someone to be a caveman conservative if they can take an hour out of their time where they focus on one thing. They don't get distracted. They don't need constant flashing images and changes, and no audiobooks don't count. They don't need that. They can just sit there and fully dedicate themselves to one thing, give it all their focus, all their time, all their imagination. It's almost like reading a good book is a form of spiritual meditation almost. And the difference that I've noticed between the people who read and the people who don't read is night and day. The people I know who read are so calmer, so much calmer, so much smarter, so much more creative, so much better to talk to. And the people who don't read are more neurotic, stressed, delusional. And they flip-flop from one thing to another. Please, please, please read a bloody book, man. I'm not saying that the book will be your tribe, right? Nothing can replace friends, family, religion. Obviously, these are big problems that we have in the Western world that we need to fix. But I'm telling you right now, if you're going to have a distraction, if you're going to have something that gives you a feeling of familiarity, you're better off joining a book club than you are being in a social media bubble, anytime, any day, any place, anywhere. Please, please, please. If there's one thing you take away from this, if you don't read, please read. Please read. And I'd start off with your religious book. There's so many people who are Christian who say, oh, I'm Christian. And if you insult Christianity, they'll go crazy on you. Meanwhile, they've never read the Bible. Oh, that's boring. Boring. I watch YouTube videos about Christianity instead. It's like, hang on. You're dedicating your life around an entire religion, and you get angry at people. You freak out at people if they talk badly about it. But you can't even be bothered to read a small book about the religion that is the religion that you're dedicating your entire life around, that is supposedly the word of God. What universe does that make sense? Like, what if you read it and you don't like it, right? Or what if you read it and you do like it, but then you have the sort of intellectual armor to defend your religion better, right? I mean, in order to be a Catholic priest, you have to spend like 6 years or 8 years learning philosophy and other languages and theology. Like, you can't just become a priest. Like, they have a rigorous intellectual standard, which is one of the reasons why the Catholic Church has survived so many millennia and is a very stable institution, despite what a lot of people say. It's because a lot of their clergy are intellectuals. They're not cavemen, contrary to what a lot of atheists believe. So please read, But again, the problem with caveman conservatives is that they speak, but they do not hear. They write, but they do not read. They think they know everything, but they actually know nothing, right? That's their problem, right? These are the kind of guys who will speak your ear off, but they won't listen to you. Like, if you converse with them, they won't listen to you. They'll speak endlessly, talk over you, no listening. When it's your time to speak, snowfest, they'll write endless paragraphs, right? But if you write something to them, they won't read it. Even if it's short, to keep up with their little attention span, they won't read it. Too much for them. They think they know everything. They think they know everything. I always make a typo with these. They think they know everything, but they think they're an expert on every topic. Like, they've saw a tweet about economics. Suddenly they know more about economics than Mark Carney. Do you know what I mean? Like, they've saw a tweet about Catholicism. Suddenly they should be the next pope. Like, they think they know everything, but they don't know anything. They're so naive. YouTube comments are often a great example of this, by the way. Like, for example, let's say an alternative universe where I don't do sociology. Instead, I'm like an ice cream guy. Ice cream, I have autism. Ice cream is my passion, let's say. And so I make a lecture about ice cream, and the lecture is about the top 4 flavors, right? What are the like, let's say I'm a world-renowned, ice cream man. My opinion is hugely respected. What are the 4 definitive top flavors? And it's a 20-minute long lecture. That's the most unrealistic part about this, right? And so it's 20 minutes long. And in it, I will spend, let's say, the first 5 minutes talking about vanilla. That's the first flavour, right? Sounds like a good place to start. Then I'll talk about, in the next 5 minutes, chocolate. Oh, yeah, chocolate, that's a good flavour. Then I'll talk about mint. Oh, mint's my favourite, actually. So I'll talk about that. And then in the last 5 minutes, I'll talk about strawberry, right? So that's the 4 flavours. Okay, and I've spoken about them for 5 minutes each, 5, 10, 15, 20. Makes sense, right? Well, here's a question. When is the most qualified time to comment on a video? Like, let's say you watch this video. When do you think you're the most qualified to comment? Well, here, right at the end, when you've watched it, obviously. Like, when you've watched a video, that is when you are at the most qualified to comment, right? Obviously. But that's not what most people do. And that can make sense sometimes. Sometimes you don't have to watch the whole thing to comment on one specific thing. But a lot of the times, people will comment prematurely. So there'll be like some guy, for example, who watches here, right? He's watched vanilla, he's watched chocolate, he's just started mint, and it'll be some guy called like Sir Greaseball, and he'll comment something like, "Where the F is strawberry?" Right? And it's like, dude, if you would have just watched for less than 5 more minutes, we would have got to the strawberry, and you wouldn't have had to make the comment, right? Again, this is what I mean when I say they speak, but they do not listen. They write, but they do not read, right? They think they know everything, but they know nothing. That's what I mean. They're always mouthing off before, even if they choose to click on something, even if they choose to listen to something, they will still mouth off prematurely, right? Before all the information that you have on offer has been given to them, they will mouth off. I've seen this. A lot of people who I know who do YouTube say that this is this is one of the biggest things that annoys them. It's one of the only things that annoys me. But it's like people who comment prematurely, and it's like if you just comment at the end, comment when you're the most qualified to comment. Why comment about something halfway through and then 5 minutes later I'll talk about the thing that you've just commented on? Like, why not just wait? Why not just wait until the end? Do you know what I mean? And again, not every comment has to be like that, right? But this happens so much. And it's because they think they know more than they do. I kind of wish that YouTube had a feature where you could see how long someone has watched a video when they've made a comment. Like, this person has watched 20%, this person has watched 40%, do you know? And then maybe you could sort the comments based on how long someone's watched something for. Because to me, that's the most important thing. Like, I don't care about how many likes a comment has. I don't necessarily, though public opinion is of course important. I don't necessarily care about when someone's made the comment. It's like those guys who comment first. Who cares? Who cares about your first, right? What I care about is, how long has someone watched this for? Have they watched it from start to finish? Are they the most qualified to talk about this? Because that's the comments that I personally value the most. Like, the people who watch from start to finish, I want to hear what they have to say. I want them to tell me if I'm right or wrong, what they think, add some more thoughts. That's the comments I like, right? So I kind of wish that was a feature. I wish I could or at least the creator could see how long someone has watched for and sort by. That'd be great. If there's anyone from YouTube watching this, feel free to take that feature. Feel free. Hey, we should do that here. If you've made it this far in this very long lecture, comment pineapple. You can either just comment pineapple or put pineapple in your comments. This can be a thing between you and me. Right, I want to see how many people actually make it this far in a lecture, right? Let's see how many people just comment prematurely and how many people, make it to a certain part. Put pineapple in your comment. And if you see someone down below who has not put pineapple in their comment, and I know, they didn't make it this far, right? They're one of the people I'm talking about. They speak, but they do not hear. They write, but they do not read. They just want to get their sewage out there without, without listening to the people who do not force them to listen to them and that they have voluntarily chosen to listen to, if that makes sense. So that's the tribal bubble, big problem. The last symptom, I guess you could say, is what I call progression stasis. So let's talk about that. So let's say a caveman is hungry, so he goes out on a mushroom hunt, right? And usually he goes out and he sees a red mushroom. That's what he's used to. So like red mushrooms with like little white dots on it, sort of like something from Mario, right? And he's used to them. He sees them, he eats them every day. He loves them, his family loves them. But then one day he sees blue mushrooms, right? So he's like, whoa, blue mushrooms? Like what? I've never seen a blue mushroom. Me like red mushroom. Blue mushroom? Me no know, right? So what would happen in this situation is that the caveman would be hesitant to eat the blue mushroom because he doesn't know if it's poisonous, right? He doesn't know if it's going to kill him. He doesn't know if it's going to kill his family. Cavemen were not stupid. They had risk management capabilities. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here now, right? The only reason why you're alive is because your ancestors took the appropriate risks and those risks paid off. And the risks that they did take didn't kill them. So the caveman, contrary to popular belief, would not just, oh, blue mushroom, that's new, meat, right? It's like, no, he would avoid the blue mushroom and he would look for the red mushrooms. The red mushroom, that's comfort. He's had that many times before. Blue mushroom might not be good, might be poison, right? So, and again, this is a logical thing, right? This is risk management. You've got to manage your risks appropriately. He doesn't have, information at his disposal about the blue mushrooms. So, of course, it makes sense that he goes for the red mushroom. The problem is that cavemen conservatives today are similar, with any fresh idea constantly being poo-pooed, even if it actually has many benefits. We've talked about some of them already with the 15-minute city. But a good example from around 100 years ago is when you go outside and it's rainy, especially British people will know what I mean by this. It's terrible, right? You get soaked, your hair gets soaked, your clothes get soaked. It's not good, right? But you have an umbrella, right? You just go out with an umbrella. The umbrella picks up all the water. Your hair doesn't get wet. You don't get wet. It's all good, man. Life is good. Well, here's the thing. When the umbrella was first brought to the UK, men rejected it in general, right? And they would rather go outside in the pouring rain and get their hair and clothes wet. And the reason is because they said it was effeminate, right? They associated it with one of those little lady umbrellas. They said, oh, an umbrella, that's something that women use. I'm a man, I don't use an umbrella. When I go outside, I just get poured with rain and I just deal with it, right? In actuality, the real reason is because cab companies, right, they had a vested interest in sort of preventing the umbrella from becoming status quo. Because one of the things that people used to do is people used to get cabs when it was raining. Even if they didn't need a cab, even if they could get from A to B by walking, they would get one anyway to avoid the rain, right? So they would get like a horse and carriage or whatever. But with the invention of the umbrella, the carriage industry would decline because people would just walk to their destination. And so they actually had a vested interest in poo-pooing the umbrella and saying, oh, it's feminine. Real men don't use umbrellas to keep their industry profitable. So it's almost like a psyop in a way, like sort of 19th century psyop, against the umbrella. If you don't believe me, look into this. Now, of course, this is ironic because meanwhile today, loads of blokes use umbrellas. Like no one looks at any of these men and goes, woman, you know what I mean? Like no one looks at that. Like no one bats an eyelid at a guy with an umbrella. It's like, no, you don't want to get soaked with rain, you use an umbrella. End of story, right? But again, this is one of those things where cavemen conservatives, not understanding that they're being literally psyoped by the carriage industry, they genuinely believed that having an umbrella was a feminine thing and something that was shameful. This is what I mean by progression stasis. Like the umbrella was a new invention. It improved people's lives. Oh, I don't want it. I don't want it. I'd rather keep on being poured down in rain. That's what I mean by progression stasis. A good example of progression stasis today is the opposition to lab-grown or murder-free meat. Right, so right now people have meat, and when they go to McDonald's or whatever, it's from an animal. The animal's been killed, usually in a factory farm. Or I don't know if McDonald's use factory farms, but a lot of places use factory farms. And these animals grow up in terrible conditions, covered in their own feces. You know, you've got like little piglets being smashed against a wall in front of their parents. You know, like just awful things, like terrible conditions that no sane human being, if they really understood how bad it was in these factory farms, they you know, and people nag at vegans and laugh at vegans. I don't blame vegans at all for doing what they do. I quite admire them, actually. You know, but we have terrible factory farms where animals get treated with horrendous disrespect. Well, you know, now we can make meat using stem cells, right? So you take stem cells, put them in a petri dish, the meat grows, you have animal meat without having to kill an animal. Caveman conservatives, they see this and they go, no, I don't like the sound of that. They think that lab-grown meat, murder-free meat, as I like to call it, is literally like a bunch of plastic in a petri dish made to look and taste like meat. Like, they think they're eating like microplastics. They don't realise that it's actually an animal. Like, it is an animal. It's the same thing. It's just, it's like rather than having to kill the animal, it's in a dish. And I understand it sounds awful, lab-grown. It sounds like, ugh, you know, ugh. Like, who wants to eat lab-grown meat, right? But in actuality, like, it is the same thing. And it's early days today. Like, this is very expensive today. I think a few years ago, like, a simple patty was like $300,000. I think now it's got down to like, I don't know, like $20 or something like that. In the future, however, it's going to be even less. In the future, lab-grown meat, murder-free meat will be cheaper than real meat. But the caveman conservative will still want what he's familiar with. He will still want the animals to die. He will sort of pretend as if it doesn't really matter. Like, oh, the animals don't really care. They're not really conscious anyway. Anything so he doesn't have to accept this genius new innovation where it's the middle ground. It's like, no, you don't have to go vegan and never eat meat again. But we also don't like animals being killed. Lab-grown meat is the middle ground. It's like you get your meat, but no animals die. This is genius. This is like lab-grown meat is a pinnacle of human genius. And it's early days today in the 2020s, but in the 2030s, the 2040s, this is going to explode, in my opinion. I know, I really do believe that. And the problem is, what's going to... And that's what I mean. Like, meanwhile, tomorrow, the news will be like, lab-grown meat outsells meat. Because it will, via economies of scale, it will inevitably come to it will inevitably be true that lab-grown meat, murder-free meat, is cheaper than animal meat because there's way less investment required. Farming is very expensive. It's very laborious, labour-intensive. Lab-grown meat is not. And so by economies of scale, it is simply true that lab-grown meat will get cheaper than the normal meat. What will happen in this circumstance is that many farms, factory farms especially, will shut down, and that will drive the prices of sort of murder meat, if you would, real meat, higher. And so it's going to get to the point in the future where only rich people can afford real meat, and lab-grown meat is what like the normal person eats. But conspiracy theorists will say that this is because the Illuminati is trying to get people to eat like cancer meat or something, and meanwhile they're hoarding all the real meat for themselves. I can see that coming a mile away. In reality, it's just basic economics. You know, if lab-grown meat does become cheaper to produce by economies of scale, people will buy that because it's cheaper. Farms will then shut down. The less farms means more meat will become more expensive. And so this is a conspiracy waiting to happen, is what I'm trying to say. Like, lab-grown meat today is viewed very negatively. Like, it's viewed as like, oh, it's a terrible thing. I think even the meat industry is similar to how the umbrella, the carriage industry tried to psyop men in the UK about the umbrella. The meat industry, I believe, is trying to psyop people about lab-grown meat. And so I think in Florida, I think their governor DeSantis or something banned lab-grown meat in Florida, something like that. And again, that's like, it's part of like the anti-lab-grown meat psyop. It's the same thing as the umbrella. But mark my words, that will be overturned. But this is a conspiracy waiting to happen, in essence. Like, this is something that is not the case today, but in the future, in the 2030s, 2040s, like, you will have conspiracy theorists talking about how when I was a boy, we could eat, you know, real chicken, and now I have to eat this lab-grown garbage. Only Jeff Bezos can eat a real chicken now. And again, it's purely because of a lack of understanding of economics. It has nothing to do with some Illuminati conspiracy. But hey, you know, it is what it is. But yet again, cavemen conservatives prove to be a mirrored version of progressives. Cavemen conservatives, they just say no to everything. No, 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 no. Anything new, no, 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 no. But progressives are the opposite. Progressives say yes to everything. You could give a progressive the dumbest idea ever and they would say yes. Because progressives make the mistake because their entire life, their entire ideology revolves around the future. And anything new is futuristic. And anything that moves away from the past is progress. They think anything new is good. And so you could say to a progressive, do you think we should let men cut their balls off? Do you think that's a good idea? They would say, oh yeah, that's a great idea. In fact, the National Health Service should pay for it, right? Like they would actually say that. Do you think that, I don't know, do you think that people who are 10 years old should be able to vote? Absolutely. It's ridiculous that young people don't get a voice in society, right? Like they would say something like that. I don't know, like, do you think like it's possible to get married to a water bottle? Absolutely. Well, who are you to decide what real romance is? Of course people can get married to a water bottle, right? And this is why progressivism is so ridiculous, right? Because they have no limits to where they say yes. It's like they're so open-minded that their brain falls out. We all know that as conservatives, but the caveman conservative is the opposite. He's so closed-minded that it's like he has no brain. You know, anything new is just incomprehensible, even if it's positive. What's worse, if something manages to get implemented anyway despite such hostility, and it works out in many big ways but has some smaller flaws, the caveman conservative will only focus on said flaws, demanding a return back to a romanticised past. A good example of this is, back in the day, people used to live in an agricultural society, right? Like everyone used to have their own farm and used to live on the lay of the land, right? And had their own animals. Whereas now we have a more complex society. We have an institutional society where we have culture, economy, law, media, health, etc. And so, you know, people live in cities, more urbanized. We've had the Industrial Revolution, etc. And so we live in a more complex society today. And a lot of caveman conservatives, they look at modern society and how progressives, neoliberals, have corrupted each institution of society, corrupted culture, corrupted the economy, corrupted law, corrupted everything, right? Like everything, all the institutions are corrupted today. And they look at that and they go, no, I want out. I want out of this society. I want to go back to the time when we all lived in a farm and we all like had cows and it was just a more simple life. You know, like I don't like courts. I don't like, banks. I don't like, police. I don't like, supermarkets or whatever. No. Like I want to go back to just being me on a farm with my wife and my 50 offspring. It's like they romanticize the past. A bit, and it's not because the past doesn't have some merits. It does, but it's because they're so immature and so cowardly that rather than take back control of the society that they are in and that conservatives made, to take back control of the culture, the education system, the media, law, health, etc., they would rather run away. I call this the small farm psyop. I believe that progressives intentionally promote this sort of, trad farm lifestyle to cavemen conservatives in particular, to get them out of the picture, to make it easier for progressives to retain control over society. I've made an entire production on this called The Small Farm Psyop, which was very negatively, it wasn't negative, it was actually positively received, but there was some negative response from caveman conservatives who can't understand what I'm saying. I think I had some guy on Twitter, he messaged me and he said, like, why do you want people to work for Klaus Schwab? Like, rather than have a farm? Don't you think having a farm is more healthy? And I'm like, what am I meant to say to that? What am I like? No, you're dumb. You're just a dumb person. No, you're a coward. You need to stop running from society, take back control of the institutions, make them conservative again, and then we can have conservative cities. Then we can have all the benefits of modern society without the negatives that progressives bring with their corruption. You don't have to go back to 1000 BC and live on a farm. That's stupid. You can have all the perks of modern life with none of the downsides if we just play our cards right? Let's revolve people's lives around God and family and friends again. Less about social media, less about the internet, less about, fake empathy and status, right? That's what we really need. But again, the caveman conservative cannot comprehend that at all. If you tell that to a caveman conservative, he'll say that you work for the World Economic Forum or something like that. Like, you're one of them. You're one of the Illuminati. It's just ridiculous. And I'd say to these people, lay off Stardew Valley for a bit. I've noticed, well, a lot of these guys, they'll play like Farming Simulator or Stardew Valley or some other farming game. They'll watch Clarkson's Farm, and they go like, screw it, I'm going to leave school, I'm going to be a farmer. It's like, dude, you don't know anything about farming. You've never been on a farm in your life. You've never picked a berry in your life. I'm going to do it. I'm going to put my hand in a cow's bum. That's what farmers do. It's like, okay, and then 5 minutes later when they realise actually farming is a lot more difficult than people think. My grandfather was a farmer, right? It's a tough job. The guy died early. Farming's not easy. When they realise how difficult it is, they come crawling back and go, maybe I'll just have a garden. Maybe I'll just have a greenhouse. But I still don't like modern society. It's like, come on, grow up. Ironically, if we followed the desires of either caveman conservatives or progressives, we would actually end up living like cavemen again. We would end up living like cavemen with cavemen conservatives, because they never would have discovered fire in the first place. They would have poo-pooed the wheel. They would have gone, what's wrong with walking? Come on, we don't need a wheel, man. That's stupid. And with the progressives, well, their beliefs always lead to anarchy anyway. Right? Because, they promote stupid things that drive society into the ground, where it makes the society collapse, and anarchy spawns from said collapse, right? Like, people just lose faith in the society. Like, we see that today in the UK. Like, the UK is way too progressive, and as a result, we have borderline anarchy in a lot of our cities and towns. Like, people have just given up. People don't follow the laws. People don't care. People just stopped caring about everything. It's terrible. So these are the 3 symptoms of cavemen conservatives, and I hope that I haven't come across as too elitist or rude or whatever. I promise I'm not trying to. I know that I can come across that way, but I have to explain these to you as I understand them in a stern way, because it's a big problem, and I've seen too many people who I like and who I love and myself in the past fall victim to these symptoms. And it does them no good. So let's end this on a positive note, right? Civilizing the cavemen. Why do cavemen conservatives need to be civilized? Well, they stink up conservative politics with populist garbage, right? So, narcissistic, psychopathic leaders come to power by, preying on their insecurities, preying on their desires. For the sake of their own ego, they don't actually solve the society. And they make society less about God, less about family, less about friends, and more about the populist leader. They form a cult around the populist leader. They worship the populist leader. They substitute the populist leader for God. And it's very low IQ, very caveman, very stupid. They give all conservatives a negative reputation by association. You might say, who cares, right? Like, what does that matter? Why should I care what a progressive thinks about me, or a centrist or whatever? Well, you should care in a way. But it's not about wanting to be liked by everyone. As a conservative, you're not going to be liked by a lot of people. That's just tough love, right? Like, you're saying what is true. Like, you're not going to be liked by everyone just for that alone. Progressives like to live in fantasy worlds where they can pretend like the world that they want to create is the way that the world is. Like, they like that. Of course, it's not about being liked, but it's about there's a lot of sensible people who haven't quite had the proper nudge towards conservatism, nudge towards God, nudge towards religion or whatever. And they see a caveman conservative and they get put off by the whole thing. They just think like, well, if that guy's a conservative, I don't want to be. And as a result, they live these sort of directionless lives where they're not quite committed one way or another, and they don't really know who to vote for. And, it's like cavemen conservatives are not representative of conservatives, but they're very loud. Like, they're some of the loudest people. And so it makes us look bad. Not only that, but they massively slow down the inevitable future. Right? The future is inevitably conservative. We are going to see huge amounts of a rise in Christianity and Islam, especially in Europe with the latter, over the next few centuries. Progressives don't breed. They're very selfish, individualistic people. They would rather, have a career where they make Microsoft Excel spreadsheets all day than start a family. And so they don't breed, thank God. That's one of the best things about progressives. And so the future is conservative through disposability, through demographics alone, whether it be through mass migration, which is unfortunate, but it is also probably going to happen, or whether it's just through some sort of conservative renewal, the future is conservative. Whatever flavour of conservatism it is conservative. There's no world where the future is progressive. Progressivism is like a fad. A multi-generational fad that admittedly has lasted a long time, but it's a fad nevertheless. It is incompatible with human nature. It will not last. But cavemen conservatives slow down the inevitable future. Like, do you think I would rather live in a conservative world of sanity when I'm 40 than when I'm 80? Like, what use is it when I'm 80 and the world's conservative again? Like, that's crap. Like, I want to be when I'm 40, like, the world's more sane. People have returned to God. People have regained sanity. I don't want to have to wait till I'm an old man, you know? And so a question you might ask is, are cavemen conservatives just really stupid people? And the answer is yes, but not necessarily forever. It depends. There's a difference between intelligence and wisdom. Intelligence is your brain. And your brain is your physical. It's what you've been given by your genes. Intelligence is mostly determined by genetics. We don't like to talk about this in the Western world because it makes us feel uncomfortable. Because we like to believe in this idea that we're all on an equal playing field, and it all that matters is how much effort you put in, and if you're a good hacking person, Reno. But the reality is no, it's purely random. Genetics is purely random. It's out of our hands. If you're born brain damaged, again, like, no amount of education is going to fix that, right? I mean, everyone's brain is people's brains are more vulnerable to certain mental illnesses like schizophrenia, obsessive compulsive disorder. Chances are, if your parents had it, you'll have it, right? It's not necessarily, but it is true. Like, it's random. It's genes. Our intelligence is just randomly determined, but this can be buttressed by wisdom. Right, so think of the brain as the engine, and wisdom is the input, the inputs that you can put in, or more like the brain is the output and the wisdom is the input. If that makes sense, that's your education, that's your experiences, that's like the things that you've read, but only someone with a certain amount of intelligence can understand certain wisdom. Otherwise, they will misconstrue said wisdom. Right. Anyway, it's these two things that determine your conduct. It's the brain you've been given, and it's the experiences that you've had. Your wisdom, your intelligence, and your wisdom put together determine your conduct. That determines your political beliefs, your religious beliefs, everything. Like, that is you. That is your day-to-day life. It is what you've been given in terms of your body, and the experiences that you have been given in terms of your mentality. If that makes sense. And so you've got to think of it like a matrix in a way. Like, if you break it down, into an intelligence and wisdom matrix. Cavemen conservatives typically are low intelligence and low in wisdom, right? Like, they don't. I mean, they're low in wisdom obviously because they're mistaken. Like, they don't really understand neoliberalism. They don't understand. They think it's intentional. That's low wisdom by definition. But they're low in intelligence typically because they haven't come to that conclusion they haven't sought out that wisdom. Like, they don't have that voice that says, hang on, is this true? They don't have that critical thinking nudge that says, like, hey, is the way that I'm living really accurate? Is there really an Illuminati? They don't have that. The opposite is the ideal conservative. They are obviously high intelligence, high wisdom. They've been educated properly. They understand the situation. We went into it before. They can explain politics, theology, history, etc. They're the exact opposite. The ideal conservative is the exact opposite of the caveman conservative. On the other side of the coin, someone with high intelligence but low wisdom would be someone like a communist from 100 years ago, right? Because communism, and no conservative will like me saying this, but communism is an intellectual ideology. You'll notice how a lot of the most staunch communists tend to be highly smart people, very, very intelligent people. The problem, however, is that they didn't have the wisdom to see how bad communism would be in practice, right? It's people 100 years ago. Communism sounds like a great idea. I think if I was around 100 years ago, I'd be a massive communist. But I'm not a communist today because even though the idea sounds great and it sounds wonderful, I have the wisdom, the education to see what happened when communism was implemented. And so, as a result, I'm not a communist, right? I've seen, you can see Cambodia, the Soviet Union, Cuba, and all of the other places where China, places where communism was tried, and then they sort of, even if they don't officially change their name or flag or whatever, they switch back to a form of capitalism, right? It's like It is possible to be high intelligence and low wisdom. There's nothing more dangerous than a smart person who has bad ideas or mistaken ideas. That's what communism is. Communism is a very intellectual idea, a well thought out idea, but you have to have the wisdom to see how that experiment, that idea would be implemented, right? And that's where the old left went wrong. High intelligence, low wisdom. That's what communists are. Today they're not. Today, if you're a communist today, you're low intelligence because, I mean, someone with high intelligence would seek the wisdom, and then they wouldn't be a communist, right? So it's different today, but 100 years ago, absolutely was the case. Whereas someone with low intelligence but high wisdom would be a progressive. Like, these are people who, they don't really have the brains to sort of comprehend what's going on. They can't process information properly. They have broken empathy, broken pride, tend to be very mentally ill, but they have high wisdom. They're overeducated, right? But they can't comprehend the information in which has been put forth before them, and so they come to ridiculous conclusions that are just completely and utterly unrealistic and unworkable and do not work in the long term. They're overeducated beyond their capacity. I'm sure everyone knows that the amount of people going to college and university has increased rapidly over the last 40 years. Like that, these are the people I'm referring to, like overeducated beyond their capacity. These are people who should be working in a field, picking fruit. Instead, they're calling themselves sociologists. It's like, no, like this is like you don't have what it takes. You're taking this at face value. You're believing everything that your professors tell you. You do not have critical thinking skills. You should not be involved in this area, right? So, you just keep that in mind. But so if you keep that in mind, then you have to separate caveman conservatives into two different groups. Firstly, you have the 18 to 30-year-olds, right? Because it's no surprise when this demographic are caveman conservatives, because they have developing intelligence, right? Just because they're adults doesn't mean their brains are fully formed. I mean, they've gone through puberty physically, but their brain is still sort of going through it, really. It's not, their brain is still very plastic. That's why you can learn things when you're a young adult much more quicker than you can as an old adult. The brains are still developing. Well, of course, if your brain's still developing, you're going to be a bit low intelligence, right? Because you're a work in progress. Same thing, they're going to have low wisdom. What 18-year-old has high wisdom? Would we make an 18-year-old the Pope? No, because there's always going to be someone older who has more wisdom. No, they have low wisdom. They got no life experience. They don't know anything. Like, if you were most people. By the way, I understand the irony of me saying this because I am in this demographic, but most people, myself included, in many ways. You don't have the life experience, you don't have the wisdom. And so you put this together, and it's no surprise that someone with developing intelligence and low wisdom acts like a caveman. What can you expect from them, right? But here's the thing, they change. All you have to do is wait for development, provide them with the wisdom that they need, and they will act like a civilized person. I don't get angry at cavemen conservatives who are between 18 to 30 years old. I think whatever. I think maybe it's a phase you have to go through. Because inevitably, if you're a smart person, your brain will develop, you'll seek the wisdom, and you'll act civilized, and you'll become an ideal conservative in the end anyway, right? So I don't care about cavemen conservatives who are 18 to 30. It doesn't matter. They'll inevitably go from caveman to ideal, right? It's an inevitable transformation. The problem, however, is the other group, the over 30s, right? Because it is still worrying if this demographic are caveman conservatives. Why? Because the brain's developed by 30. By that point, your plastics are solid, right? You have had wisdom opportunities. You cannot tell me that someone who is over 30 years old has not had the chance to read a book and has not been told to read a book and has not come across, the information that actually the Illuminati isn't real. Of course they have. They've just declined the opportunity because they don't have the curiosity. They don't have the self-doubt. They don't have that sort of, wait, am I wrong, to seek that wisdom. They've had the opportunity. And that's, for them to still act like a caveman, that's not good. These are the people who I don't like. These are the people who I judge harshly. These are the people who, again, they will not make that transformation, right? They will never become ideal. They're stuck. If someone is a caveman conservative when they're over the age of 30, it's possible they could change, but the chances are they always will be. Essentially, they've been chessed, as I call it. Like there's a pretty well known sort of rule in chess where if you didn't play chess during the first 10 years of your life, but even the first 5 years of your life, you'll never be a grandmaster, pretty much. Because the people who did, the people who played chess when they were really young, they will just destroy you later on in life. It's one of those strange things. It's like learning a language, right? It's really easy to learn a language when you're young, but it's not when you're old. I call that chest, right? It's like if you failed to learn a skill when you were young, you'll never learn it. And in this case, if they failed to learn critical thinking by the age of 30, then they'll never learn it. They've been chessed out of it. They're done, right? And so in this circumstance, they have to go through what I think a process called containment is necessary. They have to be contained, right? And so what that means is, firstly, you present them with a carrot on a stick. The carrot on a stick is like, hey, if you vote for this guy, we'll give you something that you want. So it could be something like red meat, right? Like something like, we'll deport some people or something like that. But if you don't vote for us, then there'll be an encroaching boogeyman. Like if you don't vote for us, there'll be men in women's bathrooms, right? Your daughter, there might be a man in your daughter's bathroom, right? Like you've got to so it's almost like on one side you're giving them something they want if they act good. On the other side you're giving them you're saying, hey, if you don't act good, then this is going to happen. It's like you're bringing into their fear. And then what you do is you put them in a controlled chamber of sedation. That's what social media is. That's what the tribal bubble is. They're already in this, usually, right? But I say sedation because you don't want them to speak, really. Like you want them to be in a sort of controlled social media bubble where they speak to each other, but what they say is not read by the general public and by the population at large, and by other conservatives especially. Basically, like, these are people, you've got to treat these people kind of like I don't know, like there's something wrong with them, and you give them a fantasy, you give them a good fantasy, like, hey, if you vote for this guy, you'll get a carrot on a stick, but if you don't vote for this guy, there'll be a boogeyman, and then they can talk to other people in this containment, in this sedation, which is social media, this sedated, like, where they can where they don't affect the rest of society. Like progressives don't see them, centrists don't see them, other conservatives don't see them. It's like sort of boomer Facebook pages. That's what I mean by a controlled chamber of sedation. I don't mean like a literal physical bloody chamber, right? I mean like, their bubble on the internet is contained, like other demographics other than cavemen conservatives in their 30s, don't see it, right? So it doesn't affect society at large, other than these people. The problem is populists often mess this equation up, right? Populists mess containment up because populists seize the carrot on a stick, seize the encroaching boogeyman, and they use it to advance their own narcissism, their own psychopathy, their own careers. And they smash the chambers of sedation. They rile these people up, right? And they get them to spread out and sort of spread their populism to other demographics. And that makes conservatives in general look bad. This is one of the biggest problems with the conservatism in the modern era. Like, how do you do containment of cavemen conservatives who are 30 or over while eliminating the populist element that turns them into their puppets? I haven't figured that out yet. I'm not even sure if it's possible. That might be like the kryptonite of containment in a way. Maybe it's not possible. Maybe you really do just have to educate everyone before they get chessed to become an ideal conservative. Otherwise, this is what we're dealing with, populism. And so, again, the strategy is simple. For the over 30s, you contain, right? You essentially make sure that they don't spread their nonsense to other demographics and just sort of vote correctly and, let them believe in their fantasy worlds, but it's contained. And for the 18 to 30-year-olds, you explain. You say, listen, let me explain what neoliberalism is. Let me explain that there's no Illuminati. Let me explain critical thinking, right? Come on, you got to be a smart guy, right? You want to be a smart guy? The Catholic Church does this really well. The Catholic Church is one of the only religious institutions, and conservative institutions even, that does this exceptionally well. As I said, to become a Catholic priest, you have to have like 8 years of education, reading, it's like, bravo, like that's what we need more of. Contain, explain. Right, so this has been quite a depressing lecture, right, thus far, but I'd like to end it on 3 optimistic notes, because I am optimistic, despite all the poo-pooing of caveman conservatives. I am actually optimistic. Firstly, I'd like to say, remember that they, like those who hanged Jesus, they know not what they do. Just last night I was watching the Passion of the Christ by Mel Gibson. It's the 2 hour long movie about the resurrection of Jesus, and one of the things I liked is that Jesus in the movie says, when he's being crucified, he looks up at the sky and says, "Father, they know not what they do, forgive them," something like that. And I love that. I absolutely love that sort of like, you should forgive your enemies if they do bad things to you, if the reason they're doing bad things is out of ignorance. That's how I really see cavemen conservatives. It's like, if they knew how stupid they were, they wouldn't be stupid, right? It's like, when I say I hate caveman conservatives, I don't. I pity them. That's what I really do. That's what I really mean. I feel sorry for them. It's like, because they're dragging themselves down to oblivion, and they're dragging the rest of us down to oblivion. You've got to keep that in mind. Like, maybe if your parents or grandparents or brothers or sisters or whatever, who are 30 or over, are cavemen conservatives, they know not what they do. You know what I mean? Like, give them a break. They were failed. They failed themselves, but they were failed as well, Number two is that I'm immensely optimistic in fellow Gen Z conservatives. Conservatives between the ages of 18 to 30, I am optimistic. I think that Gen Z craves... I've seen a notable uptick in interest in theology, a noticeable uptick in psychology, in sociology, in history. I think Gen Z is the Zoomers are remarkably more educated by choice, not academically educated. I'm not saying go to university educated, because a lot of that is garbage, especially the social sciences that have been corrupted beyond comprehension. But I mean self-educated. I know people read, people care about God, people pray. I'm optimistic. I think Generation Z conservatives who are currently poo-pooed and stereotyped as the TikTok generation and very silly, I actually think in adulthood will be very mature. If they have offspring, they'll be very, very good parents. Maybe a little bit helicopter, but I think I'm optimistic about the future. I think this is a good generation with smart people who want to be smarter, who understand the mistakes of the past generations and want to fix it. I'm not saying, we're amazing and we have the answers to everything, because that's delusion. Every generation thinks that. But I can say with confidence, Gen Z conservatives are infinitely better than millennials, Gen X, and especially the boomers, who are the biggest failures of them all. I can say that with absolute confidence. No doubt about it. Again, actually, look at the Catholic Church. A lot of young Gen Z Catholics, much more conservative than the sort of Francis types. And the last point I'd like to make is, let's be honest, even with all the chaos, there's still laughter to be had, right? Sometimes I wish I was born in a more conservative time. I'm not one of these people who romanticizes the past and goes like, because there's a lot of great things about today, right? Like, there's a lot of amazing inventions, technology, but there's a lot of bad things as well, especially socially, and the way that society has collapsed socially. But let's be honest, there's a lot of laughter to be had today, in spite of all the nonsense, in spite of all the chaos. I mean, look at this, like J.D. Vance as a caveman, you know what I mean? Like, it's funny, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of, you've got to have a laugh, right? Like, when you're dealing with society as it is today, men and women hating each other, Christians and Muslims hating each other, everyone, different races hating each other, whatever, economy collapsing, blah, blah, blah. Look, it's all bad, right? It's not good. But even then, there's still some laughter to be had, right? Like, we can still have a laugh, we can still have a joke. I wouldn't want to be in any other time. I like, this is our time. Let's make the most of it. Let's have a smile. And, it's not all doom and gloom, right? And so, yeah, there we go. Whew, man. God, again, before I did this lecture, I said, I'll try and make it under an hour. I think it's been over an hour. I think it's been many hours, actually. I've got to learn to, do these shorter. I do apologise, but hey, sometimes I have a lot to say. Anyway, I'm curious on your thoughts on caveman conservatives, and hey, remember the pineapple, huh? Remember. You can find me on X and Twitter. Thank you for the Wall of Fame, though it is being phased out and is no longer accepting fresh editions. So, and yeah, I'd just like to apologise, by the way, if I came across as very elitist and very rude. I hope you know that I'm not trying to be. It's just that I'm right. I'm right about the caveman conservatives. This is a big problem with conservatism, and sometimes tough love is necessary. And if you've been offended by what I've said, well, hey, consider this: is it that I'm wrong, or is it that I'm right? And you're seeing what I'm right about in yourself, and you're feeling guilty about it. I don't know. Nonetheless, folks, I wish you an absolutely wonderful time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.